Is it working? It's running a little late, but is it working? Going live, going live, going live. You can do this. You can do it if you think you can. Yes, you can. You can do it if you think you can. Yes, you can. Hello. Hello everyone, how are you all doing today? Right on. I'm going to go shut that down. That's on mute, so I can still have that running. And yes. Hello everyone, how are we all doing today? Let's start off from the beginning, or as high as the beginning as I can get, because yeah, it's blocking me from the top. Hello. Who's brown? Someone. Hello, Hello, Abazaski. Hello, Runon. It's not letting me see who the person is at the top of my chat now. I've got OBS chat working though, so at least that's something. Hello, Runon. Hello, Abazaski. Hello, Tashitu Vashel. Hello, Makagooch. Hello, Bar Newman. Hello, Knight Secret for One. Hello, Tanef. Hello, Chukapetchigan. Hello, Stephen Richards. Hello, Black Maximus. Hello, Leslie Mitchell. Hello, Rapid Raceback. Hello, Steve Clarke. Hello, everyone, basically, who's here. Hello, DG40. Hello, Debrock. Hello, Just Funk. Hello, Malaga. Hello, Captain Seafort. Hello, Paul from Chicago. It has been one of those days. It's been one of those days on many levels. It's been one of those days on many, many levels. Oh, yeah. Oh. Hello everyone, how are we all doing? So let's see. The Patreon vote is still live. It is, there are 7 days left on the Patreon vote, because I set it up for a very, very long time. I was not meaning to set it up for so long, but I did, so I'll deal with it. But I thought you'd all like to see what the votes currently are. We have Nell Royals are too slow, King George V and Vanguard undergunned. What was Britain's greatest battleship that was completed? 4 votes. That would have probably been a canter through the entire British Dreadnought production. Carl Hanshaw, Italy's commissions a carrier in 1941. How would that have changed the war in the Med? Made it painful, even more so. Daniel, alternate history, mid-1940, say June 1st. Conflict between France and Italy. No other nations directly involved. That would have been an interesting one, because by mid-1940, there might have been a Joffre not far from completion. Might have been, he says. Might have been. Angenor, alternate history. US doesn't get involved with the war in Europe. Sorry, thought I felt a doggy sniffing me, and I was going, how's one got in here? There is one in here, but that one's asleep over there, rather than actually being over here. I'm not interested in that one moving. Let's see. Danny Wright. Design and careers of the 7 USN Proteus class boiler Colliers. The first purpose-designed naval fueling ships. Cool. Blackman Maximus, a world without nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons don't work at all. How does this impact the world? It's intriguing. Alan Canaris, by Steve Clarke, how his ultimate opposition to the Nazis led to him assisting the Allies. It was a very roundabout methodology. Robert Locke, was suitable of someone who was a spy chief. Robert Locke, the Axis Merchant Navy at War. Karl Gasberg, replacing the OHPs, the LCS story, but sanity hits 1995, and the States of Congress and USN. That'd be nice. Mike 66, Old Crocs at War. In World War I, all the navies dug out the old obsolete ships in reserve and put them to use. There are 8 votes for this, so currently it's our leader. There are a few on 7 though, so it is really anyone's game. Put both Carl's Italy carrier and Paul and Chicago flower class sloops, most key ship of the 20th century, both on 7. And then we have modular construction, where the Allies get it right and the Axis go wrong. Robert Locke, RN coup de main, including Operation Reservist and Tonal. Black Magnus, no Washington Naval Treaty, effect on development of ship design, effect, weapons procurement, tactics and economy. It defends there's still the London one, which there might well be, but what gets built between 1920 and 1930 is an interesting thing, and how that's going to change any London Naval Treaty. Imperial Russian Navy, 1815-1904, looking at the Navy from the end of the Japanese Wars to the Russo-Japanese War. And our last 7 is a whistle early. Frank Whittle is given consistent funding by the British government to develop jets from 1928. And we also have Michael 66, Lies, Damn Lies, and the RN pronouncements. The RN's somewhat ambiguous relationship with the truth. The RN never lies directly, they just don't always pass on the full truth. Anyway, it's sometimes not in everyone's interest to have the full and factual details. So that's gone. And we will put that over there. That there. That can go there. And I was going to put that goes there. That goes there, and that's fine by me. And then we just expand that out of it. And the question should show up quite nicely. Actually, shall I slim that down a bit? No, I'll leave that like that. So hello everyone, how are you all doing today? Hello Danny Wright, hello Death Left Couriers, hello Railway Thinker, hello Furrican. Hello everyone, how are we doing? Basically, John Shea, the common response videos are as long as the questions require. So I never bother having a limit on time on those. But the main fun I'm going to have this week is the recorded, because it still hasn't worked out, so I'm going to have to re-record it again. The reaction video for this week's reaction video, which is going to be fun. And I've got to re-record Tashima. Hello, Abundant. What if Shia Hippo swap places at birth with BT and Jellicoe? Assume that they reach the same place and Jutland is initiated. BT would get his battle cruisers wiped out. Honestly, he would. Hipper, with that amount of speed, would be able to do some really interesting things. The main difference is that Jellicoe is better than Shia and Hipper. But Hipper and Shia are better at coordinating with each other because of BT. So the thing is, with their overwhelming superiority in numbers, Shia would win that battle. And Jutland would be very different. So it's all down to communication. The sea is a communication system. It's a communication asset. It's all about communication and control of communication. But also control of it and victory over it as often requires communication. And good quality control of communication. And you'll be glad to know the Seydlitz video, which again is a key ships video, so it's supposed to be 20 minutes, is actually nearly enough 55. Hello, Michael Patton. So, 96831, it's a Hearts of Iron question against all odds. The Town-class cruisers are built without torpedoes. What would make the RN decide to follow the US idea of cruisers and abandon torpedoes on their cruisers? I mean, you literally have to probably execute some admirals, maybe string them up. You'd probably have to kill Henderson and most of the Third Sea Lords. I mean, you'd have to really go about it and literally hold guns to their heads and go, the only way you will get posts in the Admiralty borders if you don't put torpedoes on cruisers. Torpedoes are that an important part of cruiser armament as far as the British are concerned. So yeah, that's very difficult to see it happening. Let's put it this way. The Dido class carried torpedoes. The Fiji class carried torpedoes. The Minotaur class carried torpedoes. The Tiger class, as originally built, were going to carry torpedoes, but weren't actually fitted with them. Or rather, so as I suppose as originally designed rather than built. So, yeah. To stop the Royal Navy fitting torpedoes, and the Neptune class, of course, with their 4 triple 6-inch guns, etc., and other things, were going to carry 4 quadruple 21-inch torpedo tubes. For the British to not fit torpedoes to their cruisers is just obscenely unheard of. Unfortunately, I don't know. Jellicoe is clever enough that he might have worked out the signet thing, or surrounded with people who could. Potentially, he would have done, but the thing is that doesn't necessarily give you a massive advantage if you worked out that they can hear your communications and therefore respond to that. You still have to deal with a massive amount of overlay to do that, and how do I put this politely? The thing is, again, he would still have BT as the person in charge of his vast reconnaissance group. And he would still be dealing with the sheer advantage of numbers of that Scheer would have at his command. That's the problem. It's not so much a case of he's not smart, but I don't think he's smart enough to completely change that part of history and overwrite that bit of the equation. As much as he might want to, I don't think he will be able to. So I think Scheer and Hipper win that one. Because honestly, it's the numbers and it's Jellicoe's skill which pulls BT out of the fire and stops the British losing that one. But the real problem is that without those things to support it, and without the speed of the ships which BT enjoyed, BT could, this is going to sound strange, but Seydlitz the Seydlitz speeds and all the other speeds of the German battle cruisers means that if you make similar mistakes as BT does, you do not have the speed to pull yourself out of those problems. Whereas Hipper certainly has the speed to take advantage of them. If there was not a shortage of 5.25-inch guns and turrets, what are the reasons to stop design K-25 becoming the Dido class? Time to build. How can you not see or hear me, Doctor? I hope you can see and hear me now. I hope, he says. Blackman Maximus, do you think that the B-52 will last 100 years in the US Air Force? There is every chance. Michael Cooch, the Trent affair. If the Trent had been an idea of French males swinging around, the French had taken umbrage and intervened in the American Civil War, what would have happened? They'd have been flattened. Their fleet was in that bad a condition. Just look what happened to them in the Franco-Prussian War. And this was not a good fleet. This was a fleet which was in a downturn and a downward spiral. And that's a problem for them. Okay. And now, so I suppose a question about the Italian carriers. I've been unable to identify which aircraft the Italians were trying to design and in which role. Basically, I have a feeling the Italians would have probably gone with a Stuka for their dive bomber. One of the Machis for their fighters. And I have no idea what they're going to go for their torpedo bomber. I have no idea what they're going to pick up. But Maximus, without a Washington infantry, what do you think the various navies would have had in their arsenal by 1930? The Royal Navy would have the G-3s, the N-3s, and probably the successor class. They would have probably built about 12 new ships in that period, if not 16. They'd have built 3 to 4 batches of 4 would have been built, and they'd have literally tried to build them concurrently. So between 1922 and 1930, they could have got 4 batches out quite easily. So 12 to 16 new ships would have joined the Royal Navy. That would have been perfectly fine. They'd probably be talking about the 18-inch ships, the 16.5-inch ships. You probably didn't have had another generation of 16.5-inch ships and then another generation of 18-inch ships, knowing the Royal Navy. As for the Italians, would have had the Francisco Caracolas come into service. They would have slowly kept working them. The French might have completed the Normandies and the Lyons. Might have, being the operative word. Might have. The Americans would have carried on their merry way of building stuff, probably Lexingtons, etc. Whether they ordered anything after that particular tranche is a completely different matter. And the Japanese will probably be starting on the Keys. They might actually have built some of them, but it would be interesting because they'll go Tossers, Amagis, Keys, and they might have got further, but I doubt it. I honestly do doubt it, because they're going to take a while to build any of those. Nice, Aaron. How did the Americans negotiate the British if they know not only can the British afford to build the G3 and N3, but can and will build them if they have to? You're presuming they didn't. I know there's a lot of talk about the Americans not believing it. There's a lot of egotistical chest thumping, boom, 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 of people basically rewriting history. But there is a large number of Americans who do believe Britain can afford it and will build it. And there are far more of them involved in the process than there are people who don't. The Americans do understand what the Royal Navy means to Britain and the Empire, and they understand the Empire hasn't been broken by World War I. So whilst some might have been having wet dream fantasies about that idea, that wasn't the majority, and that certainly wasn't the commanding position. However, it does make rather good copy to spend a lot of time talking about it. It's like with anything, you can usually find someone. It's sort of, if you look about any current debate today, usually one of the first things people do is they reach back in time and they go, well, this person a long time ago said this was wrong, so it's taken us this long a time to catch up with them. And you're going, they were an outlier by a massively long way. They write good copy, which is why people remember them, and they talk a lot of tonkum, but in the nicest way, they do not curry opinion, curry favour, or curry the populace with them. So, it ain't happening. It just isn't happening. Bagman Maxus, what would Admiral Henderson do if all the books by Norman Freeman, Andrew Lambert and yourself ended up his desk when he became Third Sea Lord in 1934? Have a party. Honestly, he'd have a party. I think the first thing you'd see change would be the King George V's. I think he would sit there and look through the various things, and he would make changes in the King George V's. I think he'd make changes in the carrier designs. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see a difference in the tribals. But most importantly, I think he'd go through with he'd try and standardise in on the dual-purpose gun. Because that would be the first big change you can make. If you can make a 4.7 dual-purpose that you could fit on the destroyers, that's perfect. So I think that would go through it. There's a few things that would change, but basically because of, look at these books. Let's build better. I think the interesting one for me has always been, and it's a scribble I found in Churchill College, Cambridge, I think, in their archives. But it might have been National Archives. But it was in a file, just about, basically drafts and drawings of the various things they were putting together. And it was from one towards the illustrious class. And it had an illustrious with deck edge lifts. Was it in those archives or was it in the ones up? Actually, think about it, it might have been in the archives up north. It might have been in the archives. I've got to go visit soon. It could have been. It could have been in the archives. The sort of that file paper. It could have been in Newcastle and Tyne archives. Or rather, the Tyne and Weir archives, as they're called, in Newcastle. Could have been in them. But it's an interesting idea because it would have added extra aircraft for not much extra weight. So would Vanguard have had a better chance of mothballing if she'd been built with 16-inch guns instead? Probably not. It would allow you some sort of interplay with American shell design. If you've got a similar enough breach, you can take American shells. But seeing as British shells and American shells are often designed differently, and therefore with different lengths, and therefore the breaches didn't always mesh, that's no guarantee. It's basically you would have to change a lot of governments to get her to survive. So, how many more Charnels could the Kriegsmarine have gotten if they turned the resources of Bismarck class into them instead? Well, this is the interesting debate, of course, because someone's already commented about, well, they didn't have the arm production, all these things. You have efficiencies if you are continuing it. So one of the problems with the Bismarck class, one of the problems with the infrastructure, etc., is they can't use it efficiently because they cannot necessarily predict what they're going to need. Whereas when you're building, if you're building the same class over and over again, and you're keeping to roughly the same design, you can predict a long way in advance. So you can actually maximize more out of your infrastructure. This is the thing. If I know exactly what I'm going to need roughly 6 months before time, I've got plenty of time to build it. Whereas if people keep changing design, and this is part of the problem with the Bismarcks, it's problems with Charnels, it's problems with all of German production. People keep changing the ideas of what they want and this, that, and the other. It changes the quantities. So if you have a standardization, you can be far more efficient and you can generate far more with less waste. Alright, so look, I'm rebuilding my YouTube playlist from scratch. Do you have any idea how much content you and Drekpad add? I do realise that over including shorts, reaction videos to my own content, and comment response videos, I am planning on putting out over the next roughly 57 days, because yes, well, 56 days, because today is day 2. Yesterday was day 1 of 58 days. I am planning to put out over those 58 days 174 videos. Senator Ryan Spansky of the Battleship New Jersey put Nagado as the most powerful battleship in the world from its commissioning to the launch of Bismarck. Do you agree? I'd say it's half a dozen on one and 6 on the other. There's about 3 I'd put at that level. Possibly 4 if I include Hood along with Nelson and Rodney. But I definitely have Nagato as the most powerful Japanese one. And I wouldn't say Bismarck changes it. I would not say Bismarck in any way, shape or form changes what the most powerful battleship in the world is. But there again, I am far less of a Bismarck fan than many others. And I am far less enamored with it. Maybe it's because I've studied it as closely as I have. I do know, when I first started looking at it, I was always portrayed that this was going to be a great ship, that this was a ship which was a powerful ship, which the Royal Navy was scared of, etc. And then the more I started looking into it, the more I looked into it and remembered some lessons my father had taught me, some lessons others had taught me, in terms of analysing ships and analysing structures. The more and more I have looked at the Bismarck class, and I've just felt sad. I feel sad for the fact that these ships, which could have been so great, were let down by the committees which are shoehorning this, that, and the other into them. And you end up with a very inefficient ship. And honestly, here is the really cruel thing. Because you change that event a little bit. HMS Prince of Wales already does a nasty shot damage to Bismarck in the Battle of Denmark Straits. You have another Golden BB. You have another battleship, another ship hit, another good hit like that. And Bismarck could have been knocked out at Denmark Straits instead of Hood. That happens, history changes. If the Golden BB hits Bismarck instead of Hood, what is the world going to remember? I think in many ways because Bismarck scores this massive hit, this very successful, very lucky shot on Hood, that is remembered as this really powerful ship. If not, it would have been one battle and out, and how would anyone then turn around and claim that was so powerful? It just wouldn't be. There seems to be a mighty fluff behind me complaining about something. I'm not sure what. Serious, why didn't the Victory get blown to matchwood before breaking the French line at Trafalgar? Honestly, none of the ships really get blown to matchwood before breaking the line. Once they're in the line, once they're close enough and they're getting sufficient damage, then you have ships start blowing up. But honestly, trying to hit a position on a wooden ship which is going to blow it to matchwood is very, very difficult. RN reaction to the Forrestal class from Rob Dennett. Honestly, the RN were slightly jealous, but that's because they wanted the CVA-01. And they didn't get that, whereas the USN got the Forrestal class, which were rather cool. Britain didn't want a Forrestal class. This is the trouble. This is one of the problems when people start going, well, the American ships are the best in the world. They are the best in the world for the Americans. But for other nations, when you consider their crewing requirements, the intensity and various things they include in their ships as part of the course, other nations look at it and go, frigate. There is a reason why, as time has gone on, American designs have proved less and less popular with others to buy. I'm not saying other nations have been boosted in popularity, but the reason is because of the crewing requirements the Americans build into their designs, and it becomes very difficult. You basically have to redesign the entire ship to put in the automated systems which most nations consider necessary these days to deal with their crew requirements, principally because their governments just aren't prepared to pay enough to have enough crew to match the Americans for ship. Would you be able to give a brief history of submarine periscope? With warning, yes. No, let me put it this way. Normally I would grab a book, and once I had a timeline in front of me, I'd happily give it to you. But, I don't think I have my submarine tech book with me. So no. And frankly, the mood I'm in, I'm not... when I say mood I'm in, what I've been having the last couple of days with Mum falling over, house hunting, all those things, my brain is not in the place where I'm going to go from my head and rely it. So the only other option would be to look up a Wikipedia timeline, and I don't want to do that. Because I don't think anywhere else is there a decent timeline on submarine periscope development. Not that I've found and checked one of a website yet, so... no. But another time, when I'm at home and I've got my books all around me, ask me again, Blackburn Maximus, and I'll happily do it. Now, second, would I be right to think the British 1920s fleet modernisation was only one part of the gradual fleet replacement, as doing it all at once is not practical economically? It's also not sensible economically. Because if you do it all at once, then that creates a huge surge of work, which requires many, many yards, and then they have a glut, and then they have a collapse. That is a good way to have yards closed down, because they have to make sudden loyal space for you, can't take on any merchant orders because they're dealing with all your naval orders, and then suddenly you're gone away, and they have to try and go about and rebuild those relationships that they've just lost with all the civilian community. Doesn't work that well. So if you have it as an ongoing program, not only is it better economically for you, it's better economically for your yards, it's better technologically, because it means instead of you modernizing all your ships with, let's say, 1924 technology, if something new and cool comes along in 1926, 1928, you don't have to do it all again. They're already, you have got ships going through, so you can do it gradually, and you can also learn from the modernization. Every member of the class you modernize gives you more experience to better modernize the next one. So it's more sensible to do it in sort of as an evolutionary and ongoing process than it is to do it in one big lump. Nice one. Would you agree this was the worst nightmare scenario for the IJ and USN? Where in the non-treaty world, the Iron have 3 Admiral, 3 Courageous, Eagle, Hermes, Argus class carriers in its fleet. If the Royal Navy had 3 Admiral, 3 Courageous, Eagle, Hermes, and Argus class carriers in its fleet, I would be saying that's the starting point. Where are the purpose-built carriers? You've got Hermes there, but honestly, by the time you get onto that level of force, there's going to be another purpose-built carrier coming through. They're going to be rounding those out numbers, because Eagle sort of can fit in with the Courageous. Sort of. Hermes and Argus are escort carriers, and the Royal Navy, well, cruiser carriers, and the Royal Navy would have liked at least 8 of those. And they'd be wanting at least 4 fleet and 4 strike carriers. So 3 Admirals is 1 strike carrier too short. So you're looking at a strike carrier and 6 improved Hermes. At least being added onto that. That's honestly what I would expect to see the Royal Navy be at about 1930-32 if there had been no Washington Naval Treaty. Because of the way the Royal Navy thought about its deployments around the world and its presence mission. And where it needed those carriers. You'd find a couple of fleet carriers and a couple of cruiser carriers sitting in the Mediterranean. You'd find a couple of strike carriers and a couple of fleet strike carriers sitting in the home fleet. You'd find a couple of strike carriers and a couple of cruiser carriers sitting in the Indian Ocean. You'd then find a couple of cruiser carriers sitting in the China Station, Far East, and a couple of cruiser carriers sitting in the South Atlantic. And there you go, there's your 16 carriers deployed. All around the world, all doing duties. And Britain's barely strained a muscle. That's roughly what the Iron would be looking at. They might be going further at that point, but that's be where I'd expect them to be by roughly 1930. If they've gone that much into naval aviation, A, they haven't lost the fleet air arm to the Royal Air Force. They've kept the fleet air arm of some kind, and B, they have really pushed on. As I mentioned, thinking about the German sunlights on their channels, will they still be restricted on engaging the Royal Navy? Yes, because honestly, if you were sensible with your engagement rules would be only engage where you think you can win. In which case, Lutyens might well have decided to fight Renown. But if you have, when you have a rule of don't engage the enemy at all because I don't want to lose anything, that's a very restrictive engagement. It doesn't matter what your numbers are, what your strength is. If you're going to go down that route, you're going to go down that route no matter what the scenario. Steve Clarke, we discussed MPs showboating in committees on Discord. Can defence chiefs refuse to answer open session questions on national security grounds, and can the MP be banned from the committee? I would say open session questions on national security grounds, they have to be very specific. One of the troubles is there are certain red lines which the MPs can word their way round. And MPs are usually MPs because they're fairly decent with words and we're finding a weasel way through. So they are technically asking, and this is, I think, what I know, considering the event you're referring to, technically, what they were asking was not, but it's very, very grey technical, i.e. it's a specific wording that is wording its way around and in almost any other form would be able to be shut down as national security. But because of the specific way they're wording it, i.e. not asking about specific operations or anything ongoing, not phrasing it in the context of specific operations, etc. They can just. I'd say it's something which I would love that MP to be example where, if you do that, you're in trouble, the committee. But the trouble is, it's nothing new. It's really nothing new. And in fact, you can go back and look at some of the open committees in the 1920s and 30s that Winston Churchill was on, that other MPs were on. And some of the questions they're asking were the newspapermen writing it down and reporting in next day's newspapers. And sadly, the precedent has long been set. We might disagree with it. We might think it's not sensible to ask these questions when they have a closed session to ask these questions. Why ask them in public? But they do. Parlementaire 10.5, that's 105mm, 65 SK C33 versus 100mm 65 Type 98 as dual-purpose AA guns. Which one would you prefer on a capital ship? Honestly, I quite like the 100mm because of its rate of fire and reliability. But the 105 does give you some interesting options. I'm gonna go 100mm for the gun, but if I was talking about the shell, I'd probably go for the 105, but it's a very close thing. It's a very, very close run thing. Paul from Chicago. When did the RN willingness to promote, train, consult petty officers, chief petty officers begin to match British societal class mobility? In Gordon, World War II, later. The Royal Navy have been promoting petty officers and chief petty officers since, well, it's well-known fact in the Age of Sail. You have to... Okay. So, one of the problems you have in the British scenario is that, A, the people who are promoted tend to be very good at aping the people they then form into the new class with. And B, the quick way the British nobility tends to absorb new people who come into it. In that, you can very quickly be reading about someone who is a knight and who is this, that, and the other, and they're a senior captain in the fleet and the knight and they have all these status things, and you're sitting there going, wow, this person must have a really interesting background, they must have come from the nobility. And then you look at them and go, oh, they started out as a sailor on a merchant ship, were impressed after already having taken their mate's qualifications. Okay, so they transfer to the Navy, they're made a petty officer, from there they end up getting promoted to midshipman, going up the various ranks, and end up as a senior officer. It's not unknown of. In fact, there are people who get to full admiral in the Age of Sail who have started off from being a sailor. And there are a fair number of them through the Royal Navy's history. The mutinies didn't have any effect on that. In fact, they never really have. One of the first things you realise in the Royal Navy, especially even in World War II, but World War I and even the Victorian Navy, there are movements. Now, the Victorian Navy is an interesting period which is often pointed to because in that period it's far, far harder because of the Victorians, but the Victorians are the abnormality. The Victorian social structures are the abnormality on the Navy. And remember the classic quote from Fisher, that Nelson himself couldn't join the Royal Navy as an officer under their current criteria. That is the period where you have issues. Before that, you're fine. After that, you're pretty much fine. Very quickly. During that, there are issues. There are still officers who make it. There are still people who do make it and do transition. But they are far, far rarer as a percentage during that Victorian Navy period than they are prior to it or after it. Battleship Russo. Wasn't BT promoted above more senior admirals to get the British battlecruiser fleet in 1914? Certainly what BT likes to portray himself as, but actually the battlecruiser fleet in 1914 wasn't that senior posting. there were other posts which were considered more important. So that's why there are more senior vice admirals doing various roles in the Grand Fleet and elsewhere in the world than doing the battlecruiser fleet, because the battlecruiser fleet is, well, as it's originally called, it's not called the battlecruiser fleet. It's the battlecruiser force and battlecruiser squadrons. It's not separate from the Grand Fleet. It's literally just in charge of the reconnaissance section of the Grand Fleet, and therefore it's not that senior at that point. BT gets it because it's his political skills. He gets it because it's a dashing, daring position, which he can use his political connections to make it look bigger than it actually is. But at its time, it's not. So it's often marketed as he jumps over people, and there's often a list of all these senior officers who it could have been. But then you look at the roles they're actually doing, you're going, that's technically senior to his post. That's senior to his post. That's senior to his post. That would have been a demotion to go and command his post. And you understand what the difference is. Plus, there's the fact there are some people who are on the list who are given as he's jumping over who are not going to be given C commands because of their age or various other illnesses and issues they have. So, yeah, it's a marketing thing. I jumped over all these officers to get to the battlecruiser fleet. Yeah, except it wasn't the battlecruiser fleet when you got it, and you weren't that senior, and no one else that senior really wanted it. BT was not a double promotion like Mountbatten. Mountbatten was a strange thing. Rambrazo, what was the point of torpedoes and battleships? I absolutely hate them, but honestly, it's a leftover point from when engagement ranges were far closer. And the idea was torpedoes were another thing you added into the battle line to fire at the enemy. Ruthlessly efficient. What was the best heavy cruiser of World War II from each country? Well, the trouble is, for the Commonwealth, the only real option is the county class, so you can't really pick. Unless you want to pick the cut price counties of the York and Exeter, which frankly no one wants to. So it's going to be the counties. Pick a county. HMS London probably is the best of the British Commonwealth ones. The Americans, I know who my favourites are. I'm just going to check they serve in time. They serve in World War II. They do. Well, my favourite for the Americans is, of course, the Wichitas, USS Wichita, but of course it's probably got to be the Baltimores. It's probably got to be the Baltimores because they just are really, really good ships, even though I personally prefer the Wichita. I didn't miss Paul. I got back to Paul. Bangmasters, if the British had managed to take an auto-loading 14-inch gun, do you think that the Americans might refit the Iowa class with it post-World War II? That would be an interesting discussion. I think what they would try and do is scale it up for the 16-inch. I think that's what the Americans would try to do. They try and scale it up. Ruthless Efficient. What Axis country had the most survivable battleship? Well, you've got to probably say Yamato and the Japanese, because that's pretty darn hefty for taking damage. And I think anything taking considerable damage is an interesting one for the Axis countries. So I will go with my order of preference of classes in terms of the new builds for World War II. In terms of survivability, go Scharnhorst, Bismarcks, Littorios, Yamatos. Nice one. How did the American opening offer to the other treaty negotiation teams change if the Brits were planned to build the biggest of their post-World War I battleships and battlecruiser designs considered? If the British are building the biggest ones, the Americans really are panicking. Because that means they've got to either get a new treaty, a new law through to get more funding, and they've got to fight with Congress for more funding, and they've lost the people who were willing to fund the Navy. Most of them are dead. That's the big interesting thing for the Americans post World War One is a lot of their navalists who were in power have died. There are some really interesting people who are just as famous for their battleship designs as they are for their politics, i.e. Tillman, who, frankly, they're gone. And the people like them who would have secured the funding for Navy are gone. Black Maxus, how devastating would a toolboy be if it outfitted with the AGM A62 Walleye kit and Lancaster were equipped to operate it? That would be a very big explosion, and you would need to be a modified kit to make it work, considering the size and scope of the toolboy. But I have a feeling you would see some very, very, very precise explosions going off. Very big ones, and probably there would be a lot more ships quickly sunk, but also a lot of concrete bunkers and submarine U-boat pens would have toolboys going in through their entrances, which would be really not nice for them. Really, really not nice for them. They really wouldn't enjoy that. Apparently I've dropped 4.1% of frames, so I do apologise. Thank you, Bejon. How would the British have negotiated? How would the British have negotiated with treaty powers if they'd known the US war debt was not as much as of a noose around their neck as it been believed? Why do you, why do you think the British believe that it's a noose around their necks? British don't treat it as a noose around their necks. They really don't. They don't. They want to pay it down as quickly as they can, but that's because the British government always likes to pay down debt as quickly as it can, historically, prior to World War II. It's only been since the economic theories that have come into place post-World War II which have changed that. Prior to World War II, the British have a standard policy of war fighting. They go into debt fighting the wars, and the moment the war's over, they go as fast as they can to pay down the debt. They've been doing that for hundreds of years. That's their methodology. Get out of debt as quickly as possible. They don't like operating a government in debt. If they are in debt, they want it to be for capital, for big major capital investments, not for war. They will because, and their reasoning for this is if you pay off the debt as quickly as you then can attract more debt if you need to fight the next war. Britain always fights its wars in debt. This is the whole thing about Napoleon. Napoleon didn't understand that of economics. He was always predicting Britain's economy was going to fail because the British war effort was founded upon debt, whereas he founded his war effort on plunder, on taxes, on things he could physically see and touch, whereas the British are running their war on debt. But the thing is, the British are able to incur a large amount of debt, service it, and then repay it as quickly as possible so they can then fight the next war. That's how the British operate. So where's this idea that the British are, under a noose around their neck? It's not considered a noose. It's considered perfectly normal. They're in debt. Trust me, in the nicest way, the Americans were the least of their debtors in World War One. Britain has lots of debts to lots of other countries, but also huge amounts of debts to certain private financial institutions. Huge debts. So, Clarke, question 3. What is the minimum reasonable tonnage allowance for an escort carrier using aircraft available in 1957? I'm looking up the weight of a particular aircraft. In In 1937. You're probably talking roughly 8,000 tons, 8 to 9,000 tons in standard, and 14 to 15,000 tons fully loaded. So something like the Bogue class is probably about the minimum for 1937. Rapper were the RN carrier losses early in the war a result of bad application or lack of understanding how to escort them? Well, you can't claim lack of understanding because the British actually have written the book on how to escort them. They're just not following it. They have lots of bright ideas, they're trying to deliver it, and they're making lots of calculations about the viable risks, and they're wrong. So, bad, I don't know, people ignoring the application, people ignoring the books and making bad decisions. That's probably was rapid back. Black Muslim, you said before a Type 83 of a Daring Class 5-inch in twin gun layout were about would the third stern turret be located on your Type 83? If I was going to go for with a third turret, I would probably have it. I'm going for a Daring Class Daring Class design, etc., and 3 turrets and 1 aft. I'd probably want that beyond the flight deck, so sitting at sort of some level down the flight deck, but also above the hangar. If I had my way, there would be probably a close-in weapon system of some kind, because I would probably, if I was my Daring Class idea, I would want to have 3 76s and 3 30mm gun, 30mm cannon, and the odds are, well, actually no, I could go with 4 and 4. That would actually make a lot of sense, because then I could do the 30mm cannon in diamond formation, 1 forward, 1 aft on top of the hangar, 1 forward in front of the bridge, 2 at 1 on each wing, and then have on each corner have a 76mm, and that would be better. So I'll go with that. That's a very gun-heavy design, though, but that's me being very, how do I put this? Pragmatic on current logistical reasons, because we can load all those shells. So if a ship is carrying that many 76mm, double 76s and double 5 inches, so it's got 6 5-inch guns in 3 twin turrets, and it's got 8 76mm guns in 4 twin turrets, 1 on each corner of the ship, and it's got 4 30mm phalanxes. Then that's going to be a lot of firepower. Current phalanx is 20mm, basically. Up 10mm, and you make me sort of happy. If the R's got the small tube boilers, how fast would these ships have been? Would they get modernized before the Queen Elizabeths? Probably, and quite potentially they could have got to 28 knots. They've got the space. The R's are not necessarily bad, they're crowded compared to the Queen Elizabeth class. But not bad. Why hasn't the name Russo been reused by James? Yeah, because there's nothing politically problematic when the name is there. Wait for the next generation of aircraft carriers they build, and we'll see. How did the USA and IGN respond if the RN has the worst nightmare scenario carrier fleet of 3 Admirals, 3 Courageous, with Hermes, Eagles, and Argus in the 1920s? A, you're presuming that's their worst nightmare. B, you're presuming in that scenario there's no treaty. There's no treaty, so honestly, the Americans are probably need to build carriers from scratch, considering all the Lexingtons we built as battle cruisers, and the same with the Japanese. And honestly, how quickly are they going to build them? How quickly are they going to get involved? You're going to have to do a lot of politics in America to get aircraft carriers built beyond Langley, even if the British have that many carriers, because the British argument is going to be, we have these carriers because we need to have security for our trade out all over the world, and therefore these carriers are about trade security. That's what Britain will be strongly making the case they are for. And quite a lot of people might well write that off as Britain's playing world policeman. That's why they have carriers. We don't need them. You don't actually fight wars with a carrier. You don't fight wars with a carrier. I can hear the arguments now. So I think whatever response they do will be slow. We'll be watching what the British do. It'll probably come in the 1930s if there is a response, not in the 1920s. Ron, what nations also did the turrets on turrets of the USN? I think the Germans and the French looked at it, but I don't think anyone actually also did it. I don't quote me on that though, because I'm sure there is somewhere knocking around. There's a small ship wandering around which also has a similar design, but I don't. From memory, I can't think of any other ship which has that. Of all the battleships built or designed, would have been the best for the RN to have as a group of 3 if kept in commission until the same time as the others, taking into account refitability act. Of all the battleships built or designed, That's an interesting question. That's an interesting question. That is an... Oh, would it be that one or that one? Sorry, I am literally, and I will admit this shamelessly, going through all the designs of the G's, J's, etc. for all the Freeze designs, and having a look at them and going, if you want to know what I'm using to look through this, it's the Warship Projects 1900-1950 website. Warship Projects is one of my favourite sites to wander to when I have to look at these things, because they're very good at getting plans. They seem to source them very well. That's interesting. Let's see. Surviving World War II, different design. Oh, that's good. I like that. I like that one. That one's a nice one. I'd like one with a higher max speed though. I think that's more useful. It's only 25 knot max speed. Okay, we need something which has got that heavy and got that space, but has more speed. Oh, I think I have a winner. I'm not sure. Maybe not. Note like that. Not keen on that one. Don't like that, of course. No, oh good lord, no, not that one. Oh, this is going to be a tough one for me. This is going to be a tough one for me, because what would I want to survive? Okay. So I'm going to go for something which you possibly were expecting, knowing me, but might not have been. There's always an option that you weren't expecting this because, well, I am mercurial at best of times. And yeah, I am going to go, once I manage to get it in the screen. Hello. There we go. This is fun. Oh. Hello. Now, I would probably go with the F. Well, the F2 is going to be maintenance far easier, etc. But the F3 with the 15-inch guns, I'd say the F3. I'd say the F3 because if you think about it, you've got aviation aft, which you can easily adapt into carrying helicopters and set up a helicopter platform and hangar aft, so it's easily adaptable to the helicopter support. It's got the 15-inch guns forward. You've also got the spaces you can put in various missiles. You could very easily add in a radar system if you consider the 1950 style radars and 1960 style radars onto that vessel. And that would give you all the firepower, all the various air defense missiles you could put in, and helicopter facilities. That's a really good design to go with, and it has a very, very high top speed. So yeah, I'd go with the F3. Rosa, did the limitations of the treaty system apply to small navies like South Americans? It meant that whatever they ordered from the major nations would have their particulars broadcast to the world, and it meant de facto they couldn't order anything bigger than the treaty limitations because they'd have had to build because they'd have had to build it themselves, and none of them had really the infrastructure to do so. So that's it applies to them, but not directly, if that makes sense. Could the Germans have built a 4-turreted Scharnos, so A15, and could it replace 12 times 11 inch? They could have built it, but honestly, that's going to add a whole level of complexity and problems to design. If you go with that, you're going with a far bigger ship. Okay, maybe it's not much, but it's 16 knots. It's going to have to require more personnel, more to support it. There are all sorts of extra complications that's going to add in. And that's also going to affect the yards you can build it in. So you can, but you're basically going, rather than building the full turret, you're basically building Bismarck class instead of Scharnhorst. And the whole point was, one of the reasons that the Scharnhorst are easier and quicker to build and specialize, focus in on, is the fact that because they're free turret design, they're actually slightly easier and cheaper, smaller and cheaper to build. Blackman Maximus, in Build Trumps, the three of you have talked about plasma effect on hypersonic missiles because of high speed. Could it be guided via a camera and software through uploaded images of its path? Probably not. Because can it see through the plasma to with a camera with accuracy enough to actually plot its path? I doubt it. Thank you, Severed. I'd like to say it from what changes do you see with the Iron's cruisers? The Emerald class had twin 6-inch 45 caliber Mark 12 guns from the start. If the British have got into that with the Emeralds from the beginning, then you're going to have that as an earlier capability. I think the interesting thing is if they've gone in with that from the Emeralds, then you're going to have the D class as a test ship. So if you to jump into twin 6-inch turrets from the get-go with the Emeralds, there's going to be a D class which has had that as a testing, which could mean to them retroactively being having the D class upgrade with it, especially during the 1920s. Without a ship-washing naval treaty, would anyone bother with ship conversions for aircraft carriers? That's a really interesting question. I'm not quite sure the British might do that with the Admiral class. They might do that with the Admiral class. But I don't think Courageous and Glorious get converted. I honestly don't. I think they get rid of them. They honestly want to get rid of those things. The one who's trying to keep them is Beatty, and if there is no good reason that he can keep them around, he won't be able to keep them around. They're not wanted. And there's definitely not Lexington conversions, and I doubt there's the Amagi or Kaga conversions. So yeah, the conversions go right down in the world without Washington Treaty. Now, in a non-treaty world, how much trouble the US and Japan if they only have one Hosho and one Langley, as their treaty conversions haven't been done, and the Iron has 3 Courageous, 1 Hermes, 1 Eagle, and 1 Argus. Well, A, you've got, in nicest way, why would the British convert the Courageous class? The Furious has been a nightmare to convert. The British have already built Hermes. The British already know it's far easier to build a ship than it is to do it. And the Japanese have built a ship in terms of Hosho. So if the Japanese want another one, they will build another one. The Americans have converted a Langley, and they're probably considering building one. But to build one, they've got to get around the fact that their Congress doesn't want to spend the money, and they don't have a law going for allocating it and judging it at the moment, justifying it at that time. So they're going to have a problem. I have a feeling the British build something. What do they build? They might build a whole series of improved Hermes. They probably slowly work up and make bigger carriers. They probably slowly work up in carrier size. So probably you start off with Hermes. You then build something which will be about 18,000 tons adventure after you build a couple more Hermes-like sort of vessels. And then you're probably building something which is 28,000 tons. Maxwell's favourite top 5 animated shows movies. Random question to include, but let's see. Top 5 animated shows movies. Ugh. Zootropolis, definitely up there. Always like that. Penguins of Madagascar, always a big fan. Pretty much watched all their movies. Me and one of my friends have a habit of going to these movies, so we go to see a lot of them. We liked WALL-E. We really liked WALL-E. Is that 5? Considering the Penguins of Madagascar ones and Zootropolis? No, that's about 4. Next one. I used to see a lot more movies. I used to really see a lot more movies. Because I used to have Orange Wednesdays, so I went almost every Wednesday. It was an easy thing to take out my mum occasionally when she was not well, when she had cancer a few years back. It was a great thing for doing with friends when we were poor students, and so I'd go a lot. I haven't been to the cinema in years now. Actually, no, I tell a lie. I went to the cinema with Drac when we were in Canada. That's the last time I've been to the cinema. Literally, we were waiting for the plane, and we went to there. And then afterwards, he calmly gets into first class to fly home, or was it business class? Whatever it was, the upper class on WestJet, and I'm back in economy. Just leaves me in the back of the plane. No, here's the thing though. This is the point I made. I got the economy. I was really not keen on upgrading, because I think he might have if I'd wanted to, but I wasn't, because I got the economy exit row seats, which meant I had legroom, and both flying to and from Canada and flying to and from Singapore. No one else in my row. Completely free. Leggies out, lots of space. Whee! Great fun. Best way to fly. Economy premium I did for Singapore Airlines, though, I have to admit. But no, I can picture one in my head, but I cannot name... B movie. The B movie, that was good. There you go. But without naval treaties, how long would Australia hold on to HMS Australia? Try ripping it off out of their cold, dead hands. Robert Dunner, I noticed in UAD, and not in a non-treaty world, my cruisers post-1915 tend to go super ahistoric. I'll have two main cruiser types, 8-inch 14,000 heavy cruisers built to wipe out small ships, and 20,000-ton 11-inch mini battle cruisers. That doesn't surprise me much. Honestly, I often think, actually, if you're building from the navies that are existing in World War One, I think you end up with a roughly 18,000-ton heavy cruiser, and you end up with a 10,000-ton light cruiser. And a light cruiser probably has either 8-inch or 6-inch guns. I would probably go for 6-inch guns and the sheer volume of fire you can put on that. And I would say the 18,000 tons in my world tend to end up with 9.2-inch guns, sort of. But they have been known to end up with 12-inch guns. Very rarely do I go for 10 or 11-inch. Mostly because I don't like those. What is the most frequently used name for a ship used in the RN? That's a really interesting question. And I am literally searching the digital version of a book because I have the ship names. I think it's HMS Swallow. I think it's HMS Swallow. I think that is probably the most common. But it could be HMS Fox. There's also Falcon and Eagle, which are fairly common, but I think it's HMS Swallow. Swallow and Swift, I think, are probably the Swift is also fairly common. But the Royal Navy does like HMS Swallow. That's right. What if the British design the Emeralds to have its 12-inch main belt extend the cover to 7 and 5-inch belt with the 5-inch ascend belt behind the 12-inch belt? Does that make the ship better or worse? It makes it a lot heavier. I think it fairly obviously makes it better protected. But you know, it's how much does that coverage benefit you, and how much does that weight benefit you? Have Drac and your fluffy research assistant met? Well, if you remember when Drac came and helped me with fixing the construction of the offices and reconstructing the offices, because I did the woodwork, but he came and helped did the concrete work and helped me check the roof, etc. Yes, he met the fluffy research assistants and played with them a lot. I think there's one fluffy research assistant who's sleeping not far away from me now, who might have tried to rugby tackle him a couple of times. Benjamin, would Courageous and Glorious have made good ships for a small nation if the Irons sold them in 1920s? South America, Thailand, Norway, Greece? Potentially. Potentially some of the South American nations might have been interested in them, Chile especially. But otherwise not really, no. They're really not that useful. Honestly, Courageous and Glorious and Furious are some of the most pointless ships ever built. Nice Aaron, what circumstances need to change that the British Empire gets everything it wanted out of the treaty but it still pulls the trigger on the countdown to the Pacific War? Well, circumstances need to change. That doesn't matter? Honestly, the countdown to the trigger, the count, the triggering the countdown to the Pacific War happens because of Japan and America. The difference is how long away that war's going to be, and which side is going to be running Japan, and what they're going to be looking at for when it happens, not that whether or not it's going to happen at all. As for Britain, what needs to get changed for Britain to get everything it wants? Britain needs to play more hardball. Britain could have got more it wanted, it just would have to threaten to walk away, because any naval treaty without Britain in it wouldn't work. Any naval treaty without Britain in it just wouldn't work. I'm not saying, and please note, this is not me saying that the Americans threatening to and possibly actually calling in their debt from World War One would not have caused trouble for Britain. It would have done. It would have caused lots of economic issues. But it was not an insurmountable issue post World War One. It becomes an issue not even post World War Two, but post the economic collapse post World War Two. Because in the meantime, you've had World War One and the debt from that. You've had the Great Depression. You've then had World War Two. And then after World War Two, just at the end of World War Two, the Americans cancel Lend-Lease, cancel all the aid program, while ships are literally at sea. The British were expecting it to be a tapered system that they could slowly work back to normal. The Americans just cancel it immediately. And that caused a massive economic trouble for Britain as well. And then the Americans turn around and realize that they have just shot their ally who they're depending on to provide security in a large portion of the world, and stability in a large portion of the world, especially in their now fight with the Soviet Union, in the foot, and are basically causing massive economic issues because of it, because Britain is recovering as well. It's when the Americans realised that the Marshall Plan hadn't actually been extended to cover Britain. That's when they had the panic attack, because they didn't realise they hadn't included it in Marshall's workings up. And so they thought they could, and then, just not working together and not thinking things through. And that causes huge economic issues to the British that are very long lasting. And actually, the American remedy for that problem was advised against by Keynes and pretty much every economist in the UK, but it was the only thing the government saw as a potential route to take. And so they took it, and that caused even more economic issues for the British, which we only really got out of under Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s. Mainly because Margaret Thatcher, for all her very interesting quirks and points and problems and good points and bad points and all those things, she was actually probably one of the finest economists who've ever actually run Britain. Or rather, she actually thinks through the economics. She doesn't do a good job of explaining and always bringing people with her on it, but she actually does think it through. The trouble is, people afterwards like to meddle with it, and some decisions she makes are meddled with at a level which she doesn't see coming, because she expects people to behave almost honourably, and the trouble is they don't. Listen, how plausible do you find the idea of depth charge cluster bombs? It is a weapon from the Japanese light novel series 86, series the 86. It's a possibility. It's going to be interesting on the depth charges, but you could do it. I can't see anything technologically against it. I can just see problems in actually activating it, but you could do it. Aaron, of all the appropriate French officers, except the CEO of the French officers of the officers at Alexandria, which would be your top pick to replace the CEO at Mirza Kabir? I need to know the French officer corps far better to make that judgment. I know some of them very well, but some of them are complete blank slates in my understanding of them, so I wouldn't want to make an assessment on that before I actually knew them. Robert Dennett, I asked ChatGPT for the best ship and greatest ship design ever conceived. It listed Project Habakkuk. What is your reaction to the most advanced AI's take? It's one thing to think of. Definitely one of the more intriguing options ever put forward. I don't think I would pick it, but, well, I'm sure it has a reasoning. I'd just like to know it. Biomasses. What if the Greeks had been able to capture SMS Goeben from the Ottomans after World War I? Could they maintain it, and what impact would it have on World War II? The Greeks would die rather than fail to maintain it if they captured it from the Ottomans. And what effect would it have on World War II? Well, it would have been another escorting vessel. It could well have been part of... It depends if it's been modernised. If it's been modernised and upgraded, it could be a very interesting vessel wandering around parts of the world. Because the Goeben was a Moltke class. And, well... those were interesting. Interesting ships. They were well built. As I have to admit, when I was working through the Sedlitz today and finishing off that video, which should go live tomorrow, the more and more I look at them, the more and more I think the Germans were really having a problem fitting between their two criteria for battle cruisers. And that produced some very interesting designs, but I'm not sure if they're really battle cruisers. They are battle cruisers, but there's a question of where on the spectrum they actually are. As for impact it would have on World War II, if the Greeks have a battle cruiser, that's going to be part of Mediterranean force. And that's going to be an extra capital ship wandering around doing the Crete evacuations, being useful. Honestly, that's... There are times when an extra capital ship wandering around is going to change things dramatically. There are times when it isn't. The thing is, if it has been upgraded, and the thing about the Moltke class is their top speed was 25.5 knots. But that's with 24 water tube boilers. If they've had small tube boilers fitted and it's been upgraded in terms of speed, you could be talking a 28 knot, 29 knot ship. In which case it could be operating with either Force H and Renown, or it could be operating with the Mediterranean fleet. Either way, it's an extra ship with 11-inch guns. Good ones. Built-up guns, but 11-inch guns. Nice one. How would history remember the Battle of Denmark Strait if it ended inconclusively? I.e., Hood does not sink, but both she and Prince of Wales are badly damaged, as has been marked to the point both sides have also withdrawn from battle. They probably wouldn't remember it. If neither side sinks a ship, then they don't remember it. What they probably remember is that it's the first stage in the battle which sinks the Bismarck. Because let's be honest, if the Bismarck is damaged, then Victorious and King George V are coming hunting it down. If Bismarck is withdrawing damaged from battle, she's been damaged severely. In which case, King George V and Victorious will be hunting her down. And that's not going to end well for her. My favourite of the American standards. Ooh. I think I'm doing my favourite of the American standards soon. I think she's coming up as a 62nd ship. Let me just check that. Yeah. My favourite is going to be done soon. Wyoming. I like Wyoming. I don't know why. I can never really articulate why. I just do. I just find Wyoming's cool. Wyoming class cool. They have 6 guns. They have weird masts, which I absolutely despise, but they get upgraded as time goes on, and they lose those things. But honestly, I just find Wyoming and Arkansas to be cool ships, and Wyoming has always been one of my favourites, probably because of her name. Also, I have friends who have, how do I put this, who now call Wyoming home. I also find some of the pictures of her in her later life, after she's been converted to a gunnery training ship, to be really quite, cute. Because let's be honest, You look at the ship, and then you look at the guns missing in it, and you think, oh my, those guns do not fit that ship. It looks like someone's built a ship and then gone, oh, haven't got the guns. Let's put whatever we can in there. What in your opinion? Nice round productions. What in your opinion would have to happen to solve Britain's economic woes, or at least lessen them post World War II? Find a gold mine. Basically, Britain needs cash. They need cash to pay for the infrastructure that needs to be rebuilt. They need cash to pay for the food imports, what they're refixing on. They need cash to pay for the reconstruction. They need cash. Gold mine or oil. You need to find one or the other in the British Isles. Preferably light sweet crude. Both, even better. Courageous battlecruiser in the Falklands War. 15-inch guns and Seacat. Why would you do that? They're going. Next time you have a UAD session for YouTube, could you build a county-class cruiser 9.2-inch guns and then give them triple turrets? Thanks. I'm hoping to do a UAD session Friday evening where I'm going to be designing ships and just rather than working as working through as a campaign, doing a just design session. So yeah, that should be live Friday evening, and I'll if people suggest it, if you remind me, then I'll do it, or I might remember. I will write it down and hopefully remember. Nice. What is the difference between the Mark 8 torpedo and the Cold War Mark 8 Mod 4? Mostly it's maintenance and upgrade schedule. If we're talking about serious, the components are principally similar but have been upgraded and are better versions of themselves. Blackmouse, could HMS Dreadnought have been preserved in concrete like IJ and Macassar? Well, I'm not sure I would argue that Macassar has been properly preserved by putting it in concrete. It's caused some severe issues and rust in her hull. But yes, she could have been concreted in. And be treaty compliant. But the British, honestly, yeah, that was not good. I'm not sure. What does a missile battleship look like? Question me not yet. Not yet, but a lot of missiles. I know it's up to patrons, but do you have notions for your Patron 100? I don't yet. And the theme for 2024 is going to be naval aviation. Well, it's going to be aircraft carriers and flagships. And hence we're going to be starting in 2024. I've got Key Ship Series 7. Then I've got Key Aircraft Series 1. And then I've got Key Ship Series 8. All plotted out as the next 30 of those videos, which are going to be Monday and Friday during the Christmas period, because I'm not going to be doing any of the Twitch streams aren't going to be appearing until after Christmas on the YouTube channel, and then afterwards they're going to go to the sort of the Friday video. And I'm traveling, so here you go videos. Or rather, potentially, I'm moving house, so these videos are things I can record when I have a few minutes spare time, and they just may have apologized to you for not being able to do the lives and things which I normally do, because I'm moving house or something. Black Masters, how quickly would have Bismarck been smothered under your 14-inch auto-loading battleship design at the Battle of Denmark Straits? So if the British had got their dream autoloader of either 12 or 16 14-inch guns in 3 to 4 quad 14-inch turrets, she'd have been walloped. Let's be honest, at the rate of fire of 14-inch shells, and getting off probably an autoloader 2 minutes, so she'd have been receiving, with the 16 shells every 30 seconds. 16 14-inch shells being aimed in her direction constantly every 32 seconds. The thing is, with the aiming system and this was part of the issues, with the direct-to-fire control, etc., and all the things going in, that would have been a very interesting scenario for Bismarck to find itself in. it would have probably been deluged, pretty much. And that's all you really need to think about. Okay, what's the difference between the Scharnhorst 11-inch guns and the Graf Space guns? So, the Graf Space are the best, the 11-inch ones, which are built for the Deutschland class. And then, because they're using a built-up gun design to build the 11-inch guns, they build them up to being longer to make the Scharnhorst guns. So the Scharnhorst are a built-up version of the guns which are in the Deutschland class. So they're not the same gun, but they're also not exactly a different gun. We've evolved our guns, our 11-inch guns, while we've been building them through these 3 different Deutschland class. And then when we got to the Scharnhorst, well, they're not long enough guns, so we were going to build it up more. And that's the thing, when you're doing a built-up gun system, as if you go back to the gun technology video, again, the difference between built-up guns and all the various types of gun manufacture, you can do that, and you can produce a larger gun. That's what they did. Nice one. Why weren't the Americans more worried about the Royal Navy selling off its large fleet of loaded light cruisers and destroyers, and more worried about the battleships and the crocodile cruisers? Because the Americans were obsessed with size, not capability. Black Maximus, would you be able to do a key ship on HMS Prince David? Probably. Black Maximus, would you be able to do a key... I've answered that one. Glynis should. If you remind me of a note, I'll add it into something, because I haven't yet started the series which has got, in a nice way, the ships made the final decision on the 10 ships which are going to be moved into Key Ship Series 8, so if I've got a note about it somewhere, I'll probably look at it and go, does this fit with the rest? Given a budget of yes, thank you, what would a 2023 battleship be able to, say, punch into a heavily secured air and sea space and prevent a cross-water invasion look like? Okay, so I would probably want some fairly thick armour. I would be tempted to go with some 16-inch guns, because we have those, in that we know what they look like, and so we can build them more quickly. That's sort of easier. So if I was British, 15-inch guns, because again, we've got... I wouldn't be surprised if we had 15-inch barrels in stock, honestly, known in the Royal Navy, but we'll leave that to one side. There might be some 15-inch barrels in storage. Officially, I'm sure there isn't, but as anyone who has ever worked with the Royal Navy and knows their storage keeping and their system, there are sufficiently labyrinthine stores and warehouses that who knows what is being kept in some of them. I'm not even sure if the Navy knows. But so you've be putting on your sort of guns. You'd probably want a twin or triple turret forward, as a couple of them. You'd be wanting possibly Mark 53 VLS, and let me explain why. You go with the Zumwalt style VLS, because if you stick an armor belt around the edges and then you stick the VLS around, and you stick another armor belt sort of inside of that, so you have these 2 layers of armor, you are providing yourself with a fairly large amount of protection and padding against hits. And the VLS cells, once they've expended, will just become that spacing between the armor. And yes, that means you could have problems if they're damaged, but if they're damaged, it's better they're damaged than you lose the ship. You probably also want a fairly large number of secondaries. I would be going for probably actually the 76mm, and I'd be putting in a lot of those, and a lot of other close-in weapon systems to provide you with a lot of in-depth flak fire. I'd want helicopter systems for the anti-submarine warfare, but I'd also want some Mark 41 VLS for strike missiles. The 53s will be loading my air defense missiles, but the Mark 41s and will be having extra in terms of depth of magazines, but also will be loading my strike missiles, my sub-rocks, etc., to assist my helicopters and anti-submarine warfare. And you're probably looking at something in the region of 50,000 tons, at the least. I definitely wouldn't want it nuclear powered. I'd want it probably gas. Gas diesel. Gas and diesel electric. So that's Kodag. Well then, why did the Royal Navy stay wet for so long as opposed to other navies that went dry, in my knowledge, between 1910 and 1920s? The Royal Navy still isn't dry. The Royal Navy has never gone dry. Mainly because Britain hasn't. Navies reflect their countries, and if their countries go dry, they go dry. You know, that's the Americans had prohibition, etc. Now there are sort of various things, but the British have never gone dry. They've had various movements who've tried temperance movements and things that have tried in the UK. They have failed every single time. What can I say? Let me put it this way. You can all imagine the joy of trying to rip Iron Brew from me. Now, I don't drink alcohol. But there are some in my family who do. And their whiskey is their equivalent of Iron Brew. And if you consider what it'd be like to try and take my Iron Brew from me, consider trying to take their whiskey from them. Good luck, God bless, and I will hopefully get to meet you again in heaven someday. And yes, that was more of a Beltram's question, but I hope I answered that quite well. Sam Thompson. With 890 foot long, 100 foot beam, 25 foot beam with 225 300 missiles in VLS and box launchers. Soundflex along with a smattering 5-inch Mark 8 twin turrets, 6 close weapons, aft hangar B along lines of one battleship. Potentially. Wait, they still serve Ark on their Royal Navy ships? Yes, Robert, they didn't. In fact, the centrepiece of HMS Prince of Wales and HMS Queen Elizabeth is a massive country-style bar in their mess facilities. They literally have a pub-style layout with wooden paneling and big comfy seats, everything. It's why whenever we're on combined exercises, all the Americans and specifically the vast majority of the Allies tend to want to come to British ships. It's similar with French ships. They have alcohol. It's how you get the Americans on the ship. The Americans bring ice cream across or other things with them, and then they have alcohol. It's another reason why the US Marines love serving on Royal Navy carriers. There is vast quantities of alcohol aboard. Nighthorn Productions. Forgive me if I've asked as well. With hindsight, what's the best thing Britain can do for itself pertaining towards the Suez Crisis? How should the government and armed forces have handled things? You have two options. You either double down and push for it and ignore the Americans and risk a rift developing on the West, or you don't do it. If you don't do it and let the French and the Israelis go their own way, then they suffer the consequences, and probably actually don't do it without you, because let's be honest, the French and the Israelis couldn't have done it without the British, logistically or militarily, considering the amount of forces brought, especially when you consider the vital role of British aircraft carriers and Cyprus in it. However, saying that, the other option, of course, of British is they double down and basically turn around to the Americans and go, yeah, do it. Do it and split NATO. Do it and split everything you fought to create. That would have been an interesting moment. It would have created a permanent rift and a permanent problem. So probably the best thing would not have been get involved in the first place. And maybe the thing is, though, I often have great trouble people claiming the Americans didn't know what was going on. The Americans knew what was going on. If it had gone to plan and been as quick as it was supposed to be, the Americans would have accepted it. The reason I can say that is because the British are taking lots and lots of supplies out of British bases and British positions in the UK. And the Americans have lots of people running around the UK at that time, and still do to this day. The Americans are in lots of joint positions in Britain, and in Britain, sort of lot of Brits are in lots of joint positions in America. There is literally no way for them to keep such a major thing secret from each other. Langless is all the Royal Navy capital ships of the Jutland had the same amount of rangefinders and quality, hopefully, rangefinders as the Littorio class. What the impact have been? The German Navy would have been sunk. We're talking about potentially some of the best visual rangefinders ever conceived and systems set up. You have that level of capability and that quality in the Grand Fleet in World War One. Lord help the German High Seas Fleet. Measuring, well, it's not a standard type battleship. She's a 12-inch gun around knots. Sounds big enough for a 14-inch. Nah. You see, I always put her into the standards because, let's be honest, she's cute. Why would you not want Wyoming included in your standards? She's cute. Okay, so we have to. It has to be 14-inch or more to be proper standards. Okay, all right. Well, I think then it's got to be Tennessee, which is probably my second favourite after Wyoming. I like the Tennessee. She's cute. Plus, the Tennessee is proof that I could have done certain things with Queen Elizabeth class at that time period. Vision, I have lots of relatives in America. I have lots. Actually, I have lots of relatives, full stop, but I have lots of them in America. It's an interesting family. My family basically, we have two modes. We either have very few kids or we are rabbits. Scharnhorst with the 15-centimeter guns replaced by 10.5. How does it compare to the original? The 150s replaced by 105s. It's probably got better dual purpose capability, because let's be honest, the 105s are going to give them a lot more dual purpose capabilities. So better air defense, better anti-destroyer defense because more rapid fire, less capable in terms of anti-shipping, in terms of major shipping. Could do Bonaventure. And where should I send a note? Discord. Send me a note on Discord. Marin, what does Monarma look like? Composite or hordes of probably a mixture of two? As I said, I was basically thinking something like I go for Epsom armor. And that's the latest tank armor. I'd see if it's able to be work in salt water and how it deals with it. And I'd probably go for a large chunk of that, followed by by the VLS cells, followed by a large chunk of Epsom armor again. Because it goes Chobham, I forget what the D was, and then the next one's Epsom. And I think that's the most recent one. I think. That's right. If the Royal Navy had 3E, so an extra one of those, 12D, and 28C classes, they're early into a light cruiser force, how much luxury of time would they have bought themselves to plan what they replace the future cruiser fleet? That's a 33 fairly decent cruisers, but they're going to quickly start in with the counties, whatever happens. So that basically gives them a good starting point, but yeah, they're still going to start with the counties. So between the two of those, that's going to call their cruiser force. And that's going to buy them some time, but they're probably still going to start the process when they did because of the age of the seas. And because they can. And one of the things you have to remember again with the British, with the light cruisers and the age of them, is that there are all sorts of age limitations, at which point they don't count towards tonnage anymore. They're over-age vessels. And the Royal Navy did keep a fair number of over-age cruisers around. which they honestly didn't have plans for how to upgrade or use for other missions. Dorchester. Thank you, that was a deity armor. Ronan, was there a complete breakdown in communication between the US and the UK post-war? Seems like a lot of post-war issues are a result of left and right hand not speaking to each other. Honestly, there was a complete breakdown because there was the sections which were talking to Britain, and then there were sections which were just proceeding on their merry own way, and not listening or talking to anyone else at all and telling anyone what was going on. Basically, there's a breakdown of communication internally in the American government when Roosevelt dies, because Roosevelt had been controlling so much within him that when he goes, Truman doesn't step into the role, immediately isn't able to do the same stuff. And that causes all sorts of problems as different people fight for... Because under Roosevelt, they've been controlled by the status of Roosevelt. So Roosevelt had a lot of informal power as well as formal power because of his status, because he'd been president for so long, because he literally didn't just know where the bodies were buried. He buried them and buried the people who buried them. So he knew exactly what he knew. He had so much on people that he was able to keep control of a lot of people, or be feared to know so much on people that he was able to keep control of systems which, frankly, Truman wasn't able to. And if we look at the post-war presidency, you can make a solid case, and people who are far more learned in the American political system than me have made a solid case, that the system which is built by Roosevelt in World War II is only able to be run by Roosevelt in World War II. And the trouble we've dealt with a lot in the modern American political system has been trying to rebalance the system and work out the system in context of what was created. Because it requires someone who's both extremely personally influential, as well as politically influential, and a very, very capable administrator who is able to basically micromanage multiple strong personality types who have to run their departments. And that is a incredibly rare capability set and rare personnel description. In fact, you're looking for someone who's pretty much 1 in a billion people. There is also farmer armor, internal armor, yeah. If you don't know, British armor all seems to be named after racecourses. Nice one. If the British Bristol Britannia was chosen replacement for Shackleton in the early 1950s, how has that changed its replacement come 1960s? It sets slightly different precedents in terms of its capabilities, so that's going to evolve things. It's going to evolve operational actions and operational requirements. How it's going to specifically affect them, I'm not really sure. I'd have to do a lot of work to work out that one out. Given the current infrastructure, how quickly do you think the US or UK could put a functional battleship into the Pacific, let's call it? If you're going from a cold start, you'd be talking about a year or so to design it and get the design happy. You'd then have to make sure you have the yard space or open a yard, which you could spend that year doing, as well as doing that. So you could get a yard suitable for it. You would have to start up and rediscover a lot of the stuff about manufacturing of armor on the quantities and scale you need. So scaling up armor, most modern armor is designed for vehicle systems. It's not designed for something the size and scale of a capital ship. So you need to do a lot of work on that. You would probably be talking about, before it would be commissioned, the best part of 5 years, before it would be deployable to the Pacific. For operational reasons, you'd probably be looking about 6 to 7. And you wouldn't be just building one, you'd have to build at least 2 or 3 to make it viable. Doug Maximus, what if the Zumwalt class had been built with an updated 1855 Mark 71 using the Volcano-like ammunition instead of the AGS and used them to replace the Arleigh-Burkes one for one? The American Navy would be currently very, very happy because they'd have a very capable destroyer. It also probably wouldn't be replacing all the Arleigh-Burkes. It would be replacing probably the Flight 1s. So if it was slowly working from replacing the Flight 1s, they could be spending the time now working on what's going to replace the Flight 2s, Flight 2As, and possibly the Flight 3s. Reparazak, similar to your Sharnals video, would the Japanese have been better off standardizing their hulls at each level? Sloop, destroyer, light, heavy cruiser, battle cruiser, battleship, and carrier. They'd probably have been sensible standardizing them in sort of combined. You could standardize sloop and destroyer hulls. You could standardize light and cruiser hulls. And you could standardize your capital ship and carrier hulls. It does provide some efficiency because you can just keep churning out the same hulls and put different things on top of them. But it's also going to create some redundancy, kind of like the F-35, okay? You standardize between the three different variants. That's great. That creates economies of scale between the three variants. But it also provides some inefficiency in every single variant because of the compromise that has been made to serve the other variants. C. Clarke, question 4. Large capital ship autoloaders. What plans were made to deal with dealing with cook-off of ammunition in very hot barrels? Is it water jacket or forced air cooling like on Lewis gun? I think they were looking at various systems, but I think the forced air cooling of the Lewis gun was something that was looked at. But also there's the fact there's the rate of fire, because even if you're at the fastest speed you're looking at, you're talking about once every 30 seconds. Which is very different than the rate of fire. But the forces, of course, are much greater. But during that 30-second cycle time, you do have time to do things. I don't think water cooling is something they'd be going, but forced air cooling they might well have done. Bagmas, what if CGX had been built with the updated twin 8-inch Mark 5 Mark 71? That would have been pretty darn useful. They'd all been useful. It'd been useful. The US Navy is currently short of having a status escort unit. That's their real problem. Look at them for the presence mission. The Arleigh-Burkes become too ubiquitous. The Arleigh-Burke is too common a thing they've had to reach for because they haven't had anything else. So they haven't had frigates below it to send. So you can't really send an LCS to do the same mission. You would traditionally send an OHP for presence mission. Constellation class coming are going to solve some of those problems. But the thing is, they're not going to come in numbers for a while. So you send an Arleigh-Burke. You've also got the fact that when you need to send something bigger, you have to send an Arleigh-Burke. So pretty much the entire scenario for the Americans in presence is sending an Arleigh-Burke, which gives them no graduation. That you need, if you can base your fighting force around Arleigh-Burkes, that's fine. And something at that level to do your fighting, yeah, that's probably sensible. But you need the frigates to be your presence ships and doing that sort of duty when you want to send something smaller to have influence, and so you can send a destroyer as a hello, you didn't take any notice of frigate. But you also need to have something below sending a destroyer and sending an aircraft carrier and a battle group, because that's a major escalation. So you see, that's your problem. You need to have something you can escalate to without it being a major escalation, so they know, hang on, they send a destroyer, the next one is in a carrier group. They sent that, the next thing after that is a carrier group. Okay, we're in real trouble. Blackman Maximus, a nice 681. What most likely engine choice is the Bristol Britannia being arranged to chosen by a British instead of the Shackleton? I have no idea, but probably the British engine. You've got the option here of the British Bristol Turbo Centaurus or the American one. I'd say without having much of an idea, because I haven't looked into it, I would say probably the British one, because that's where the British were going, especially after what happened with the Americans. If you've read Greenfield Shipyard's Modernisation in the British shipbuilding industry and elsewhere, 1900 1977, by your former colleague King's thoughts, I'm not putting down $50 for it. It's a good book, but in my experience, it's a very specialist book. I think I do have a copy of it somewhere. In fact, I'm sure I have a copy of it somewhere. But it's a case of, if you want to specifically learn about that topic, great. If you don't need to specifically learn about that topic, you can find a lot of information from that, which you might find interesting, in the articles they've published about it, which you can get access to with a JSTOR account. Which you can read for free with a free JSTOR account, if I remember correctly. Some of them. Glinshire, reading through the transformation from sailing to steam, steel. Am I misreading some of Flamer's list, or was there a period of about 10 years in late 1800s where the Royal Navy didn't have battleships? They weren't necessarily called battleships. They had the function of battleships, but they weren't necessarily called battleships. You're looking at a period when, not in terms of, you're talking about, there's a transition from the rating system. Then you've got the big ironclad frigates of Warrior. HMS Warrior is not called a battleship, but let's be honest, she is a battleship. And then you have some of the other ships which come afterwards, which eventually are called battleships. But eventually, it's once you have frigates, and then the frigates have become, you started building cruisers, you've still got the ironclad frigates that you're building, still sort of your battle fleet, and then you start building battleships. It's a transition. But, that's why we have this book. 1850 to 1860. And that's one of the books we're looking at this evening. Robert then, what if the USN decided to create some proper destroyer leaders in 3940 and in service of World War II? What would they look like? I know the Atlantis sort of filled this role, but was too large. Probably something like an refuser, honestly. The Americans did look at that. So it's basically, it would be an Atlanta hull, but slightly less, less in terms of the guns. So slightly less in terms of the heavy AA element, more in terms of space for command and flag as staff teams. Vision, is USN Burke the ISD of the modern world? The Empire had lots of ISDs. Not really, but it is certainly a ubiquitous vessel. Thomas, do you think it would be a good idea for the RSCN to replace the Kingston class with no PV? And what would be your choice? Honestly, Kingston class, they're the... That's a constant fun thing. They're being replaced by the Arctic offshore patrol ships. I think, according to the Naval Association of Canada. If I was the Canadians, I would probably be looking at the Nudramoosen class, but the fact is, to replace the Kingstons, you need something. You do need something which is capability. I like the Nudramoosen class, or the Danish, and I would be using that as the basis of my idea, but that would be getting into Stanflex, and the Canadians might not want to get into Stanflex, and they might also consider anything like that to be a threat to their frigate procurement. So, yeah, they might change that one. But I would say if I was replacing those 12 vessels, I would be looking at Nudramoosen's as my basis for my development. How much benefit would the Royal Navy's cruiser development of the interwar period if they got all 28C class, 12D class, and 3E class? It'd be useful because they'd have more numbers, and honestly, numbers would help. Also, it might mean they can make a case for more numbers when it comes to the London Naval Treaty, in terms of cumulative numbers, which is always a big problem for the Royal Navy. I've answered all those questions, so I've now heart them all, so I know I've answered them all. Substance in the rated tiered responses. That's why we need submarines, sloops, frigates, cruisers, nuclear battle cruisers. I don't think you need quite all of those, but you do need some sort of tiering. You need sort of... I think Paul from Chicago likes to call it his squirrel tier vessel. I would call it my sloop. Sloop presence vessel, the ongoing presence vessel, the continual presence vessel. An OPV usually going around, doing maritime security, local engagement, basically turning up, chatting away with people. Then you need the occasional visitor from something bigger. That'll be a frigate destroyer. Okay, depending on which navy you're talking about, that's probably going to be a frigate or destroyer. In the British, it'll probably be a Type 31 forward deployed to wander around. In the Americans, it might well be a Constellation class. Then you've got your we're giving you a warning ship, which is a destroyer. Definitely a destroyer. In American terms, that will be an Arleigh Burke. That is an Arleigh Burke. And the trouble is, the Arleigh Burke has been the slightly bigger presence and has been that. And the British, that's a daring usually making a visit. Now, the British don't have anything above that, but the British are a medium power. They're a global medium power, but they're a medium power. The Americans, you traditionally then would have something bigger. Slightly bigger. They would turn up and go, look, we're really giving you a warning, and the next thing that turns up is distinctly looks like a battle fleet. So you definitely don't want to go push us any further. That's where the Americans, as the major power, are missing. Because if you think about the British in the 1930s, look at what the British have a choice of. It's going to be a sloop is your normal presence vessel. Then it's going to be a C or a D class light cruiser, usually turning up. Maybe an E class. Then it's going to be that's going to be your wandering around presence. You might have some destroyers out there as well, but then it's going to be a county class making a visit. And when the county class makes a visit, that's a problem for you. And then the British have a way above that, because it's either going to be a county class or a town class. And the next level above that is the local station flagship visiting, which will be a county class. And that will have an admiral aboard. And that is the big, excuse me, you will listen to me, because the next people that turn up are going to be battleships. And they are not going to be in the nicest way. If we're sending out a battleship, it's not coming out here for a friendly visit. It's not coming out here to make nice. If we're going to the cost of sending a battleship all the way to here, it's going to turn up here and it's going to fire very quickly. So that's the point. You don't have that today. You don't have that sort of station flagship. You don't have that graduated response, because that's how you deter conflict. Because at every point you will have people, with a continued presence, that will deter some people. Just the mere continued presence will deter some people from doing a stupid course of action. Then the slightly bigger ship turning up and going, hello, we really are interested in this area. We prefer to be your friends, will have the desired effect. Then for another group of people above that who think, well, they're only sending that, they won't send anything bigger. Oh, frigate, they turn up in something bigger. Oh, frigate, that's actually quite big. That's a lot of guns. Okay, we'll have a conversation. And then you've got a level above that who, when they get it spelled out to them in probably very diplomatic means, but spelled out in rather blunt diplomatic means by an admiral exactly why they are there, and that's why you have an admiral of the station, so they can do that in the right way, that's a deterrence to some. And then there are going to be ones who are going to think, oh no, they're calling their bluff. They won't do it. And then the battle fleet turns up. But it's very rare you get people who go the whole way through the gradation. And let's be honest, for a lot of nations in the interwar years, a county class cruiser would have wrecked them. The HMS Hood World Tour. Well, yes, the battle sending a Hood and Repulse with a load of D-class light cruisers on a world tour was kind of the British showing off around the world that they could reach them. And it's kind of like the Queen Elizabeth class visiting the South China Sea. It shows them that it shows the world the British can reach here. We can reach wherever we need to go if we need to go. This is why we are a global power. It's why you worry about us, because even though we aren't a massive power, we can reach you, whoever you are. So listen, it's a very easy way of... How do I put this politely? If we consider the Argentinians, and what's happened to my hair? Why have I suddenly got a bit sticking up like random? Do that in a bit. But yeah, that's weird. This is the trouble with doing a video where you're staring at yourself for the whole time. It makes you very self-conscious, because it's kind of like staring in a mirror for hours and you're going, yeah, what's weird going on? With the whole sort of the battlecruiser, it's turning up. The Queen Elizabeth is turning up and going, we can reach you. So the British will go to the South China Sea, but who does that also tell them that Britain can reach them? It's a nice way of showing, without making it obvious, other nations in this world who might be interested in certain parts of British overseas territories. We can reach you. If we can get out here and deploy all the way out here, we can deploy down to you. So yeah, we can do what we need to do. Do you really want to push it? Our own reaction of some nation in South America kidnapped the British ambassador and began murdering hostages in the 1920s. A county or a battleship? There were events like that in the 1920s, and very quickly cruisers turned up and made the point. And that was it. That was dealt with. You dealt with that rather quickly. You made sure as a nation in the 1920s and 30s you did that properly. Otherwise, you might force the British to actively intervene, and that's not good for you. How would the IJN's war planning have changed to account for a stronger British Empire presence as far as 4 heavy cruisers and 25 light cruisers? More ships. That's it. I'd have had to try and plan for more ships. Would I be correct? 1981. Would I be correct that if the IJN were able to build 7 conventional and 7 nuclear-powered Kitty Hawk JFK-sized carriers, they'd go for 7 bigger nuclear-powered carriers to replace them? Yes, but under what circumstances are they building these things? What yard and infrastructure have they magically acquired? What hand wavium has been done to give them this capability? What would the modern equivalent of 1914 RM fleet be? No one really has that level of graduation anymore. How do we restore sea power discourse in the public sphere? You make it part of the national discussion. You make it regularly part of the press. You make it regularly part of the online discussion. You make it regularly part of the questions that members of government and parliament face. You know, you every time they have, if you want to build into, you push it into the national discussion. If you think about it, almost every time in the UK an MP is doing some form of public questions, they're going to be asked questions about the NHS. If every single time they did some public questions, they were asked about the Royal Navy and the state of the Royal Navy, they're going to get the impression that the Royal Navy really matters to the voters, and they're going to, at least the vocal voters who turn up and make noises, at which point they are going to start doing something about it, because they're going to want to have an answer to those questions that sounds good. A nice way of preparation to at keeps? Who's at keeps? I don't think I'm losing hair. It's going to sound strange, or rather, I am losing hair, but it's what happens in my family. In this one, it's just I've cut it badly because I trimmed it a bit. You know, I trim things, and I got some of the hair which normally goes over. I managed to catch one on the side, so it's now sticking out down there. When I cut my hair, the trouble is I cut my own hair, and sometimes I make mistakes. I really should start going back to a barber, but honestly, every time I do, I get so no. So I cut my own hair, and I don't necessarily make the best decisions with it. But I am developing my grandfather's hairstyle. What will happen is this hair will get to about here. This bit at the front will slowly go. And then I will probably be stuck with that firm sort of thing for about the next 60 odd years. Probably pretty much the same colour, knowing my grandfather. Nice one. Do railguns have a future practical use, or are they too impractical weapon? It's not an impractical weapon, it's we haven't got the metallurgy, hasn't caught up the technology. The metallurgy has not caught up the technology. That's the problem. The metallurgy of the barrel design hasn't caught up the technology. How big could UK dry docks get in a UK if it were 4 times the size? You can build dry docks as big as you like. You just have to be prepared to pay the cost for doing it. There's plenty of flat areas you could build dry docks on. For example, they did at one point consider, before Camel Laird's, building them out into the Mersey. And building dry docks which were literally open at both able to be opened at both ends in the Mersey. You could have done that, and you could have built some very long ones. And honestly, that would have been a very interesting policy to do, because if you'd done that, you could have built some really massive ships in World War II. Thank you, Josway. Yeah, I don't do a comb over, I just do this because it keeps my hair neatly and slightly more neat. And slightly more, it's basically, it's just lazy. It honestly is lazy. I'm slowly turning into my grandfather in hairstyle. Thank you, Joke Franic. Malta. Thank you. I'm just putting. I'm just doing some. I've got buttons now I can press to do those again. I think I've noticed that now. I will see. I will see, Stafford. But it's very kind of you to worry about it, but one of the things I will say is it would help if I took better care of myself generally. I don't. I find I do sleep better down here than I do at home. But I need to, once we've moved, I've promised myself, once we've found a place and we moved, I'm going to going back to the gym as often as I used to. I'm going to be going back at least 4 times a week. And I'm going to be getting back sort of to slightly healthier, because there are days like today where honestly I was supposed to eat but things happened, so I have survived off iron brew for the day. And picnic eggs, which if you look up are little small ones which are sort of egg coated in breadcrumbs, but that's basically been my food for the day. And that's not sensible. I do know that's not sensible. I don't advertise. That's a terrible thing to do. But it's the joy of adulting. Sometimes that's the way the cookie crumbles. Hello, everyone. Very, I hope it's not your last moment, because I rather enjoy chatting with you. Now, just mate, my dad had the kind of camera that would flop into an off-center mohawk in the wind. I'm letting mine go naturally. Mine doesn't do that, and has never done that. And my grandfather's never did that. Basically, it's a case of our hair's quite heavy. But the trouble is, it also has a habit of, if it's dirty, it binds together, so it looks far fewer than it is. Maritime. If the Charles get the 380mm from the start, would the French immediately jump to the Rickalues? The trouble is they've already got the Dunkirks on order. I think they might accelerate the Rickalues. I think they'll probably work on the Joffres first. What if the current US Navy had a similar CVNs as there was the Essex class? They'd be very happy. They'd be very expensive, but they'd be very happy. The duel between you and Drac in HEMA, how long can you last? I have never done HEMA properly. I did fencing and other things. I have never done HEMA. I would first have to learn how to do it, because at the moment it'd probably be Not very long, because he's got more experience with HEMA and the HEMA's rules, and I probably break the rules. But I will say that when we have been doing the demonstrations and doing the videos with swords, I have been able to keep up with him. I think he's more experienced and has an advantage that way, and I would probably therefore lean on his stamina over mine in that scenario. But I have some skill, so it would not be a quick overrun. Robert, when it comes to making a presence vessel, does it require an actual certain amount of firepower in terms of graduation, or is it more of the facilities how much you need to upscale a book? It's a bit of both. You need something that sets it apart. If it's going to be... Basically, at each level, you need something that sets it apart. It's one of the reasons why it's useful to start the sloop, or the lowest level of presence vessel, as low as you can. Because if you start the lowest level of your presence vessel as, let's say, a frigate with a fully all the guns and all the vessels, then you have to go up that much further for the next vessel, and that much further for the next vessel, and that much further for the next vessel. So if you start as a sloop, which has some guns on it, and maybe a couple of a bit of a surface-to-air missile launcher, but not much, it's a River class or Nudder Rasmussen, sort of something in between that. You'll then find have a frigate as a next generation and a destroyer as a next generation, and you have what's theoretically a cruiser, and you just have something that sets them apart from the different levels. Now, sorry, what impression the Nazis and Italians in Gen take from the Royal Navy having 20 County class, 5 York class, so that's 25 ships, 15 Lander ship class, we're at 40, 8 air fusers, 48, 16 Town class, that's 64, 16 Dido class, that's 80, 33 Crown Colony class, that's 113, 2 Emeralds, that's 115, 4 D class, that's 119, 13 C class, that's 132, with another 5 for a Chinese government in exile. That's 137 cruisers. That's a lot of ships. Remember, the Royal Navy's plan was to have 70? That's almost double them. That makes Britain very, very strong and very, very present around the world. So that probably causes them a lot of trouble. If the British went New Deal style spending across the empire in 1930s, what kind of impact would that have on World War II and post-World War II? It would actually have put them in a lot better position post-World War II, during World War II and post-World War II. It might have meant that there was the ability to build more aircraft, etc., and things in India. One of the things I would really like to have seen is a massive factory built in Ceylon for aircraft and aircraft engines, etc., which could have pumped out and supplied the aircraft to the Far East and Britain, Far East and to the Royal Navy. So if you've been able to sort of set up a factory, and this is something I have war gamed a couple of times, and it's produced very interesting things. Supermarine sets up a shadow factory in Ceylon, and the Seafire, the Gullwing Spitfire design, which they were working on for the Navy fighter, gets sent there. That then becomes the core fighter for the Far East and for the Fleet Air Arm, especially in the Mediterranean. And that changes things because of the supplies coming from Ceylon. And if you build that sort of facility up there, you have a really good network. And so it's the same as you have other supplies going on there. If you had tank factories, if you had all those things there, you would make the difficulties of supplying the North Africa campaign, the difficulties of supplying the Far East so much less. So the infrastructure really needs to be there. So, Richards, the quad 14-inch autoloader, does it put more stress on the gun barrels? I'm not 100% sure. I would the stuff we've looked up with the autoloader is our papers which were being written. So it's the idea of we know what was being released in papers, we don't know what was actually the reality behind the scenes, behind the secrecy. So there is something going on, but we can't really pierce it too much. What would have been the limit that the Americans would have stopped at in concessions to get the British Empire to sign off naval treaties? What do the British want? Honestly, I think if the British had wanted to had really pushed for it, I think they could have got the 10-7-4 ratio. I think they could have pushed for it, and they could have got the 20 capital ships and the 10 carriers, etc. I think the British could have pushed for that, but they didn't. They might have even actually been. They might have actually had to concede to the 5-3 2 point something 2.2 roughly, but have got 25 ships as their agreed number. Because the British needed more ships to be able to form free fleets. If the British had really pushed for enough to form the free ocean fleets, the Americans would have had to probably find a way to accept it and function it in. They wouldn't have liked it, but they've had to accept it. I mean, why not just take the Burke class, Burke design, upscale the hull by 40%? So maybe a rear gun. Couldn't you have a cruiser design easy and cheap? You could fit in flags facilities. The trouble is the Burke hull is so overworked. The Burke hull design. How do I put this politely? So the Burke hull is the flower of 1970s, 1960s design theory. Ship hull design has moved on a lot. Ship hull structuring has moved on a lot. You need it. This is the problem for the Americans. They are building a very old style hull and trying to cram the latest and greatest equipment into it, which is causing a lot of interesting scenarios. You need that new hull shape. You need that new hull form to build and grow from. And the Zumwalts were a good start down that road, but the trouble is Rumsfeld wanted far too much technology put on them. No, it's still 14 shore loaders. Do we know how big a magazine where they would have found from the ship carried, say, 120 per barrel and say 40's load and clip? You're basically looking at the same loadout as the King George V's per gun. That's the British plan. Because that's the standard plan for the British in terms of it. So I think it's roughly 200 rounds they carry per gun, but it might be slightly more than that. I think it's roughly 200 per round. Just checking my notes. I'm just going to do a quick search. Nope. Well, Navy WEP says it's interesting. They have it down as about 100 rounds per gun. Well, because I'm going to go and check Navy WEPs. So Navy WEPs have it down about 100 rounds per gun, but I, for some reason in my notes, have it roughly at 200. Maybe more. So what am I... where's the mathematical difference? Where is the number? Because that's a big differential coming from. And they're actually putting it down as even less for the treaty compliance. Treaty compliance, they carry even less. So that's an interesting scenario going on. But yeah, there again, if they've got magazine storage which is designed to carry... Hang on. Am I counting the ones for that mount? Because that might mean it. It might be that they've got That's an interesting one. That's a... Ooh. Yeah. I'm gonna say, because Navy Web says it, and I'm not sure where my notes come from, I'm gonna go over roughly 100 rounds per gun. But I'm also gonna say that there is a sort of fudgeable zones. Ammunition storage 100 rounds per gun, approximate barrel life 340 rounds. Enlisted is carrying 80 shit rounds per gun, but for treaty compliance, but they could actually space for 100. So they're carrying 1,000 rounds of 14-inch ammunition. But if I remember correctly, under that scenario, they were designed with the spacing for the 12 guns, so they'd have had space for 1,200 rounds. Or were they designed to carry 1,000 for 12 guns with 80 rounds per? And then once, of course, they had that. It's maths. I'll have to go dig into that one to find out where my notes come from. Question 5, Steve Clarke, question 5. Is there any sense in designing a new ship class or a war emergency build version of that class at the very start of the construction process, such that they use the same hull? Yeah, that's pretty much what the British did with the Town class. Let's be honest, that's what the Crown Colonies are. They are the war emergency version of the Town class. We like to talk about how it's treaty limitations, etc., but there's also it is a stripped down Town class design. You've got similar to Vanguard. 1970 was out practicing fire and came back and blew up coal bunker or magazine explosion. There's all sorts of an option. Both of those things would be pretty interesting. What changes would you see in the first Type 12 Whitby introduced to Bristol Proteus? Let's see if the first Type 12 Whitby introduced the Bristol Proteus 10M and the Bristol Olympus TM1 into RSOs with the following 12 Whitby and 12M Russo. If you have it introduced early, it's useful. The British get more used to it early, and that's probably going to affect their design and construction. It might especially have an impact on the Type 82 designs. Steve Clarke, question 6. If you are designing a capital ship autoloader, do you need at least 2 carousels, one for AP and one for the high explosive magazine? There are various systems about how you do that. I would think that would probably be what you might go for, but it depends. Are you going to be fitting both high explosive and armor piercing to a ship, or are you going to be relying on an armor piercing or with a slightly larger burst charge? Black Mouse was, how early could TNT be made a viable naval shell explosive? It was used as a viable one quite early on. Wasn't found to be that great. That's why they moved to gun cotton, but they'd start off with it. Could the proposed autoloader empty whole magazine in one prolonged encounter if needed? Yes. Then US Freeman wrote in his USN cruise about the Des Moines class was so big because of large magazines. They could shoot through a standard load of ammo very, very fast and had to carry more. I'm wondering, looking at my notes, because my notes are under the autoloader section. So I'm wondering if the autoloaders were going to be designed to carry 200 rounds per gun because of their rate of fire. And it was hoped to use the space that would be freed up by crew and not needing to meet their hotel needs to carry those extra rounds, or if that is just me working out based on the mass of it. I will have to investigate my own notes. It's one of the things I sometimes do. I always have it time-stamped in my notes so I can work out what I was doing what I was reading by references, and I can go back and find things and find out what my notes were talking about. Right then, I haven't managed to get to books tonight, and there's no way I'm going to get through these books tonight. So I'm going to put the books onto next week, because they're good books, but they require proper time, and I am going to be finishing roughly in about half an hour. The reason I'm going to be finishing roughly about half an hour is because, as you know, Mum had the fall Friday. I don't want to keep her up late at night, and the trouble is, if I'm talking to all you here, I love it, but she can hear me word for word down there, where her room is. So, it's not really nice of me to keep her up too late tonight. So I will go on to about 10:15, and then we'll call it a night. Sorry, not to get the books, but yeah, had too many good questions. You've distracted me. Were they right in scrapping turpits? The thing is, the key enablers which are needed for a system like turpits had not been invested in. You woken up and decided you want to say hello to everyone. Yes, we have... If I quickly get rid of this and do this, we have been joined by someone who has decided to wake up after spending most of the last session asleep behind me. Hello. You've pushed the books out of the way and decided you're going to be centre of attention for a bit. Ah, you fluffy pal, aren't you? Yes, you are. You are a fluffy, fluffy pal. I've got about another 4 second viewings and 8 first viewings this week. That's the top 5 non-military ships. Basically, only ocean liner is going to be my top 5. Glomar Explorer probably as well as in there. Night 681. You missed this question. How much trouble could 2 rebuilt Ninghai class and 2 Dido and 3 counter-communist light cruisers built for the Chinese government exile cause the IJ in World War II? Not much. Light cruisers will not cause them much trouble. That number of cruisers will not cause them pretty much any trouble. They've got carriers, they've got battleships, they'll annihilate them. And destroyers. Like most, whereabout do you think Newcastle will be in the UK? Hopefully Cornwall. That's where I currently am. Thank you, Bijan. Let's see it. There is no book out there which currently tells a bit more about HMS Incomparable, sadly enough. Let's put these there. Oh, you big fluffy thing. I know what you want. Oh, you come here. Oh. You've been asking for it for the last few minutes. Oh, caramba. Oi. You realise this seat is not designed for multiple occupancy? Hello. It appears I have been replaced by a poodle. Who's very happy. And very happy to replace me. Hello. Hello. Everyone. Hello. So, what questions have we got? If the British, Indian, Canadian, Canada, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand fully recognise the threat posed by America and Japan, well, that's one of 2. What's the next one? So nice to hear from. Hello. You're expecting PTs, aren't you? You're doing all this for the PTs. I know. You're looking as adorable as you can to get PTs in the chat. And agreed to program of building ships and infrastructure throughout the 1920s and 30s. What do you see each of them doing? Well, if the treaties are in place, they're going to be building county-class cruisers. They're going to be building destroyers, they're going to be building ports and dockyards, and they're going to be building county-class cruisers and destroyers. Because that's it. That's what you build in that period. So it's going to be county class and lots of them. Maybe they'll try and build some sub 10,000 ton aircraft carriers. Probably knowing the British, they'll be slightly more successful than the Japanese in doing that, because they won't try and build it quite so overloaded, because it really will be built as an escort carrier / cruiser carrier. And the British have already got a fairly good start on that, in that they built the Hermes, and they could probably work out from that how they can build something slightly less that will do the job they want from it. Ugh. Oh. 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 Ay, caramba. You're comfortable. I got things squashed. They're attached. They have nerves. They feel things. PT, yes. Right. Oh, caramba. How about we move? I know I'm swapping sides so it's away from the side I look towards it, but that's so you can all see the Fluffy when he jumps up again. He's helpfully now jumped down, but when he jumps up again, which he probably will, knowing him, you should be able to see him. Up again. You've now gone all the way over there. That's helpful. I'll just make it puppy cam. That'll make you all happy, and I'll stand behind the chat. There you go, puppy cam. All happy now. You've got a poodle cam. Mensch. Hello, everyone. It is a treaty-defying standard poodle. Because you have to remember, in the UK, we do not have giants. So despite the fact he probably fits the size profile for a giant poodle, he is a standard. Now, how many 9.2 inch gun, 9.2 inch gun armed county class light ships might the British consider in a world where the treaty has failed? They would probably just keep building some. Oh, okay. You want pats? Oi, caramba! You are so demanding. You really are. You're lovely, but you're demanding. I know. You cute? You realise how much I have to reach over to get to you because of the position. Because you decide to go and be right on all the pillows. Please note, that lump is me hiding my pillow, because otherwise someone, and I'm not going to name names to who, someone decides he's going to lie on that one exclusively. How are you? You happy? Life would like to know, have the dog treats got to go that high up? Yes. He is very capable at climbing things and jumping. We're gonna strip. He's a real poodle. Bred to look pretty and kill all the people who thought all the ceremony guards were just pretty. Yeah. He definitely has learned how to cheat the system. You should see him sometimes on these videos. When he knows that he knows you all know the PT scenario for him. Him and the Corgi share notes. If there were Corgi treats here, though the Corgi is currently... he's on the special data note because the Corgi has been naughty. It's slightly Slightly naughty in his eating habits. So yeah. You're not rubbing that in on him at all, are you? The fact that you're still allowed all your food and he's on a diet. You're not at all rubbing that in. You would never, never torture your little brother. No, sorry. Would it be right the RM would in non-treaty world have 6 carriers, 7 battlecruisers, and 14 battleships? I mean, balancing capital force with the USN, IJN, who are expected to face the other at the cost of ignoring the British. You're probably looking at the British working in multiples of 4. So they would probably be hoping to build up to 8 battlecruisers and 16 battleships. And probably at least 8, if not 16 carriers. As I said, I think you'd find 4 fleet, 4 strike, and 8 cruiser carriers. Instead of the British wrong. Do you like German Shepherds? Yes, I do. But we have poodles because we have the amount of asthma that my mum said. My mum says that was very specific types of asthma. So poodle is better. Corgi we probably shouldn't have, considering the amount he molts. But we have him, and he's lovely, and we wouldn't be without him. But yes, we have you because you're far better for everyone's breathing, aren't you? Even if you are currently licking me in a very endearing way to hope I give you more yes. You can be as endearing as you like, but I am not falling for that trick. I would agree with that, Josway. You've just written, for all the grief you got in your tenure, President Carter has made the best use of his presidency of any commander-in-chief in my lifetime. I would argue that President Carter has really tried to be very, very good in the world. And he's certainly one of the ones who's actually, I swear, has become more famous post-presidency than he was during his presidency. Have you built any model ships and Lego? And if so, how many? There's about 50 or so sitting in my garage at home. But they're all boxed in, so that's another thing with sort of moving. It's space for all the stuff. Which I know at least one person on here has, in the chat, has experience of. I think probably most of us have experience of having lots and lots of models from our hobbies, which we can't display them all because we don't have the space. Sorry, would the Courageous and Furioso class aircraft carrier have been better ships had they been built to the same design as conversions? No, you'd have built a far better ship than you built the conversions. For starters, you wouldn't have had to have all the trunking of all the all the smoke and funnels through the hangar like you had in Furious, which cut down on the air group. You'd rearrange some of the Courageous star shaping and hull shaping and hull design. Honestly, there are some very weird points in them which are because of their conversions, aren't there? Yeah. Allergy suitable cats. Interesting. I can recommend an allergy suitable dog breed, which is very good, aren't you? You're lovely. Very loyal, very fluffy, very friendly, or rather very woolly. They're entirely wool. And he has both the fine and the thick wool. Question 7 appeared for a second in one of the chats and then appeared in the I think will appear in the other one in a second. Magnus, what are you most looking forward to in Norway's wind trip? Narvik, but also there's a destroyer in Sweden which I'm really looking forward to. What's the schedule for December fun? Lots. I've got the Excel spreadsheet almost written up, so it'll be coming out soon. But it's going to be non-stop. As said, there is going to be 174 videos, including shorts, comment response and reaction videos, over a 58-day period, which started on Saturday. You're a funny thing, aren't you? Nice one. Why did the RN not take the Gloucester Sea Meteor into frontline service? It's not considered to be worthwhile investment. They don't think it's going to be frontline fighter viable for long enough to justify the expense of putting into service and suiting adapting carriers. Because remember, once you put these ships on, you're going to have to adapt a lot of things to fit them and to take them. I'm not sure. The Millennium Falcon is going in the main coffee table once we're somewhat settled. Advantages of marrying a nerd. Oh, that is very lucky, isn't it? Hello, Seaman David. Leslie Mitchell. Visits to Tyne and Weir Narco in December or next year. Honestly, the money which would be for going for travelling to archives is going on house hunting at the moment. If I'm being perfectly honest, I've got that's another cost which is coming through. So, yeah, I doubt there'll be any archive visits in my future other than maybe the National Archives before we move house and settle down and then sort out the finances after that. But I'd like to. I'd like to do the Birkenhead, I'd like to do Tyne and Weir, and I'd like to do Glasgow. I haven't done them. I've only managed to do them once this year, any of them. And I'd like to do them, I'd like to do them at least twice a year if I can, but yeah. Dr. Simon has been building a Falcon on his Facebook page. Oh yes, he has. Nice one. You missed the question. I probably did. Would a 9.2-inch 50 be what the British would go for if they were designing a 9.2-inch cannon class? More than likely at that time, because they were planning a 50-inch 50 for the F3s. They were planning all sorts of 50. That was basically what they were going with, 50s. And I love that one. Are you in Cornwall for Christmas? I doubt it. I think, well, let's put it this way, there's only so much money, and we've paid for a month down here. Or rather, a month for the family to be based down here looking for properties whilst I am going all over the place, helping on the property search, doing some of that, as said, doing the first visits to most of the properties, and then going off back home to sort out stuff back at home, etc. So, yeah, we're travelling around a lot during this month. I doubt... it's not cheap. It's not... because you're de facto running 2 properties per month, and... yeah. It's made certain things have made it easier, not having to deal with the commitments to certain institutions have helped, so that's worked out as a benefit. Although the fact they still haven't paid me is a bit frickin' annoying. That's right. Ironically, it appears that Canada's largest naval museum and archive is in Calgary. Cool. That's right. If the British built 40 cannon class heavy cruisers, what would the Aussies... what would make the Australian Aussies not want their cannon class, not want to be built in Australia? Not want to build their cannon... If they... Let's put it this way. If the British are building 40 Clanty class heavy cruisers, the costs of building Australia might be far greater than building in Britain because of the level of infrastructure or reconstructions going on there. So if the British are building that many cruisers, there's going to be a voluble efficiency cost effect of building in the UK. But there again, the British government might be prepared to subsidise building in Australia for the capacity of therefore building the infrastructure and facilities in Australia to support any Far East deployments. So you see, there's force and against to both. There always are. They do. We have quite a big garden at home, but they do want. They have expressed a preference for larger gardens down here, haven't you? You have expressed a preference. He also expressed a preference for a little garden which had a stream running through it, but you're not getting that. You're not. You're not getting the stream. I love you dearly, but you are not getting the stream. In the nicest way, you would never be dry again. You like to swim too much. Seven. Look, if our Naval History Canada Mark II, mine is just Hilton or Delta in Ottawa for your hotel at both National Archives and the Canadian War Museum are about 4 blocks radius. Also, very good steakhouse. Oh, you know us and Hiltons. We do like them. It seems to be a constant theme of the naval history trips that we end up in Hiltons. We have no idea why. I'll do look at all the prices every single time, and the Hiltons work out at the sweet spot of security and of other things. Because, and this is the point with the security, it always sounds big-headed. It's not for us. It's for the sheer number of computers and drones and cameras we're bringing with us, so we don't have to carry them around constantly. We can put them somewhere safe. And we all had interesting experiences with hotels which were below that price point, where security has been an issue, and we've just gone, we would rather not have to deal with that while we're travelling. We don't want to think about these things. We want to be able to park our stuff at the end of the day and go get food and not worry about it. And that's what we're doing. Wet wool is never a benefit for the house. Wet wool is never a benefit for the house, is it? You think it's a benefit for the house. The rest of us do not think it's a benefit for the house. If you're going to position yourself like that, I am going to point the camera right at you, because I know what you like to be. You like to be on camera. You jumped up to be on camera, you're on camera. You're trying to slip your... Yeah. You literally shoehorned yourself onto the... You have pushed the books out the way. The books were positioned here. He has pushed them out the way. Notice the books are behind him, so that he can be in the front. Does it make sense that the British don't buy the American Harpoon? That Sea Eagle would be used as the Iron submarine launch, and if the British don't buy the American Harpoon, that Sea Eagle will be used as the Iron submarine launch and ship missile. Potentially. That or Exocet. That or Exocet. Raleigh does think that anything that's a benefit for him is a benefit for everyone. He is very certain of that. Oh no, haven't got a live month on your debut employer. So, former employer, yes, they haven't paid the final checks. Line reductions. HMS Victorious had its own rebuild, avoided all the headaches, and had its final build been what was envisaged from the outset. Could it have been a worthwhile long-term venture, and could we have seen other carriers follow suit? Yes, and yes. If it had worked as planned and hadn't been so expensive that it drained all money from the budget, it could have been, and other carriers could have followed suit, and who knows what changes that would have brought about. Oh, yeah. Oh. Oh. No, right. They're in interest. It'll be interesting. I think it's going to end up with either a scenario of lawyers or something involved. Who knows what? But again, that's more money to work out, and frankly, I'll see what we can do. What are your thoughts on the Key class fast battleships? I think I've put them all in a Key ships. I've done a Key ship. I'm fairly sure I've done a Key ships on the Key class because they're cool. Nice one. As you missed this one last week, would it be accurate to say World War I destroyer HMS Swiss was the post-treaty destroyer class decades early? No, but she certainly has some of the points which lead to them. She's not there. She's not them. Definitely not in terms of structure and design, but she is a step on the path. That leads to it. She shows where they're going to go, but she isn't anywhere near what they will be. Oh, the Wi-Fi keeps going up and down. Well, not Wi-Fi, the Starlink signal. It's gone down to red. Oh, that's scary. It's up to yellow again. Go back to green, go back to green. Stop worrying me. Stop scaring me. Oh, thank Lord, it's back to green. Oh, that's better. Oh, it's back up to green. That's good. Would a battlecruiser like Renown have been inevitable without World War I interference? Yes. The other option is they jump from a Queen Elizabeth class to R class to a Hood class, sort of Admiral class battle cruiser style ship. Because let's be honest, the the Admirals were originally battle cruisers. And if you go back to Spectrum again, if the dog allows me, I just gonna need my hand for a second. So you have the battle cruisers, 2 words, battle cruiser, 1 word, and fast battleships and battleships. Well, the battle cruiser over here is sort of really equivalent of generation is where the Admirals start out. They moving across to battle cruiser, 1 word, because of the experience of Jutland, but they definitely don't get to fast battleships or battleships. And the thing is, the British build battle cruisers because of their need for presence around the world and their need to do their duties. So yeah. And economic warfare, basically, for Britain, it makes sense at that technology point to have battle cruisers and battleships, almost more than any other nation. Because for Britain, they need to be able to cover the world to deal with defense of economic warfare and prosecution of economic warfare against others. For Japan and America, there's a reasoning because the Pacific and its scale, its size, and the scope of movement across it. But for other powers, there's a real question as to why would they build them. And I always love the Italians, because the Italians basically look at everyone else trying to build a battlecruiser and go, why the friggin' are you doing this? It doesn't fit you. It doesn't fit your needs. You could sort of make the case for the French and maybe the Dutch, but that's really not a good need for them. And the Germans especially, battlecruisers are really not sensible for them. Glad there's no signal problem in the US MS. I'm currently running this over Starlink, so occasionally it goes down. Tim Hortons are now in the UK. They are. And you can find Timbits. And actually there's a channel called Beard Meets Food, where the gentleman's done a Timbit challenge, and that was a interesting thing to watch. He's a professional eater, and I have to admit, when I discovered that, I was both surprised and enjoyed the fact that there are such people. Although seriously, eats way more than I could ever eat, and he's skinny as a rail, which is really annoying. From what he seems to have said, having eaten at Tim Hortons in Canada and in the UK, he felt that some of the quality of the ingredients in the UK seemed to be better. He said he liked the ones in the Canada as well, but he said there was a difference in flavours, and did wonder if it was affected the UK food standards. I'm old enough to remember when they were good. Period. Yeah. Sorry, getting distracted patting the poodle. I do admit I'm getting distracted doing that. So, nice one. If World War I holds off, when does the Iron start relegating the 12 13.5-inch Super Dreadnought and 5 13.5 battlecruisers and 10 12-inch and 6 12-inch battlecruisers into reserve or second line duties? Probably about 1916. 1916, and between 1916 and 1918, those are going to be being replaced. In fact, honestly, when the R-class enter service, they're probably going to start with the 12-inch battleships. They're going to start going to second-line duty reserve status, possibly even further. They might be given out to the colonies. The 13.5-inch ships won't go. The 12-inch battlecruisers will go with whatever replaces is the next generation of battlecruisers to come after the R-class battleships. And, yeah. It'll go on from there. Furrican, I eat 2,600 to 4,000 calories a day depending on my work. Always been skinny, Nini. Ah, you lucky thing. I'm watching Beard Meets Food after this live stream. He's from Leeds. Yes. Alt 92. Food additives, including sugar and salt, are a hot topic in every trade agreement negotiation in the EU. Yeah, they are. Nice one. What is the likelihood that the British gone from maritime patrol aircraft akin to the Canadian Argus? They would have ended up with an AEW version like the Shackleton got. High, because they need an AEW and that aircraft profile fits the requirements. There you go. If you're going to cuddle up to me, everyone's going to have to see my fat tummy. But they'll focus on it. They can focus in on you. Oh, and the fact I'm wearing my comfy trousers. I was hoping not to show off the fact that I was wearing my comfy tracky bottoms. These are not smart tracky bottoms or even nice tracky bottoms. These are my comfy gym ones, which I've wrecked in many gym episode experiences. Because no, I do not wear the lycra or the modern stuff. I tend to wear a gym t-shirt and tracky bottoms to the gym. I look very out of place, but slowly work my way down. Right. Actually, speaking of that, I think we are now at the 3 hour mark, and I can hear people moving around outside, so I'm going to say, last questions. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. You happy? You happy? You had a nice time? Think. You going to say goodbye to them, or are you going to just sit there and demand pats? Demand pats, okay. What if there was a second Furious class built and that was converted instead of Amarante Cochrane? The Royal Navy be crying. Thank you, Paul Harris. Thank you, Liz Red. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, James Morrison. Right, now I'm going to shut down the questions in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello, you cutie. I'll pat you first. And let's end the Q&A. Okay. So you've got up so you can say goodbye to people properly, have you? Alright. Confirm. Right then. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you found it interesting. And, yeah. Take care from both of us. I'm off to take this one for a wander. You like that idea, don't you? You do. Right. Take care, everyone. Have fun, and thank you for watching.